Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies and citizens, it's joy to the world. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies and citizens, it's joy to the world. I bring a message of the truth amidst a world full of lies. I graduated from learning lies to seek the truth. Indoctrinated to be too blind to see the proof. I once was lost, but now I'm found, so I shine light. And everywhere I go is darkness, so I shine bright.
They tempted and rebelled against the Most High God, and did not keep his testimonies, but turned back and acted treacherously like their fathers. They turned aside like a treacherous bow, for they provoked him with their high places, and aroused his jealousy with their graven images. That's Psalm 78, 56 through 58. Welcome to Uncommon Ground, episode 35, entitled Looney, Toons. With me again from Kingdom in Context is the brother Sean. How you living, Mr. Griffin? Oh, can't hear you, bro. Muted up.
Doing great, Wes. Thanks for having me back again tonight. We got a fun episode going on, and I'm excited. We're already made it to episode 35.
35 already. Yes, sir. We're live for 35, and I'm a blessed man to get to do this with you, bro. So grateful to be here. The show has been such a blessing, and God is good. But what's bubbling in the live chat, Sean? You see any new or familiar names?
We got some the country dad is back. Miss Marsha's here. It's good to see everybody back here. J.O.'s here in the audience. What's up, brother? He was on our episode. Was it 3 episodes ago or 2?
I think so. 3.
Just a few back. Chico 1985, Take on the World TV is asking about where's my beard. That's what they're asking. It's probably Chris asking where's my beard.
Take on the World TV. Yep. Gotta be Chris. What's happening, brother?
But we got a lot of familiar people here. Psalm 119, Bernadine, Carrie M, King Dome, Patala Porto, Cover Time, Lisa Sevier, Fejak, Eric Rice is here. Welcome, brother. Lots of other familiar names. So good to see everybody back.
Guys. Yeah, absolutely. Thank y'all for being here. It is just a blessing and just a huge. We're so grateful to see everybody continuing to show up and show support and love to what we do, right? This is one show tonight that I felt like we had to add to the arsenal of presentations as a resource for the people, because this is a specific facet of the deception that we haven't really focused in on much. And I think it's necessary that we give it its due diligence and a nice thorough investigation that the audience can then be able to share with their friends and family. And that topic, that specific facet of the deception, is the Looney Tunes. Right, the cartoons
they are Looney.
that we are shown on a regular basis. Right, I grew up watching Looney Tunes, and in more ways than one, apparently. Come to find out, the older I get, right, not just the TV shows, but also the propaganda, the deceptions that are indoctrinating us from birth. Right, everywhere we look, so many logos, so many just. They're putting it in our face every chance they can, a spinning ball of some sort or a ball-shaped earth as often as they can. And I'd like to take a look at some of these because some of them they claim to be photographs, and some of them that people believe are photographs are actually claimed by their creators to not be photographs at all. So we're going to look at some of those tonight, and I'm excited to do so with you, my bro.
If anyone in the live chat remembers the name of this term, it's a term for basically when humanity would gravitate towards the least efforts. I know it's not just laziness, but like there's an actual term for it. It's like kind of like Occam's razor, the simplest answer, kind of thing. But I can't remember the actual term for it. If anyone in the live chat does, but it's like where mankind just tends to gravitate towards just the absolute least effort possible if they can get away with it. And so in the early 20th century, we had the rise of cartoonists that stepped out of the local papers and into the cinema world, where they then began, I don't know if you remember seeing the history of cinema, but like you transitioned from silent movies into all these cartoons that were silent, but then the cartoons had, huge scores and soundtracks and voiceovers. And that was so much easier than all the money and production required to do an actual, live version of whatever that cartoon was. And obviously you can't get a live version of Tom and Jerry, right? So, So like the cartoonist, it was a huge form of indoctrination for decades, and still is. But I mean, as far as like mass reach in the beginning of beginning and mid 20th century, it just developed mass reach, right? There's still animations, both traditional and now digital, but I'm saying like this kicked it off, right? It wasn't Hollywood didn't kick this off. It was cartoons. And to me, it seems like the government realized, okay, well, that's the easiest thing we can do that costs less money. We can communicate the message. We can paint the vision we want them to think and see for cheap with a bunch of animations.
Yeah.
And I think they just kept doing that.
They did, and they get better and better at it with more
Yeah.
sophisticated technology to where it's difficult to discern almost sometimes.
Yeah.
When they're showing animations versus when it's live action footage. And yeah, it's getting better and better. Used to 60s, 70s, 80s, not even in the 90s. It wasn't it was pretty easy to tell. Does not take a trained eye to understand that these were, cartoon images, computer generated images or composites of some sort. But these days it's getting more difficult.
Big shout out to Rich P, dropped a super chat, as well as Gilead 10. Thank you so much for your support, guys.
Well appreciated, y'all. That means a lot, more than you know. Thank you. And speaking of audience, we want to say a big shout out to everyone supporting what we do via Patreon, and all the links in the description in the video below. Would you pull up the slides, my brother? You guys definitely help us out more than you know, and it means more than I could ever express. So I just want y'all to know that I try to do something in return and update and upload some exclusive content onto the Patreon. For those who are a member of that, you now have access. So far, I've just got like the presentations for the shows that we've done in season 2 since episode 26. So there's quite a few episodes there where I've uploaded all the slides, the presentation slides in there for you guys to be able to use for whatever you'd like to use them for, and to be able to, browse at your own discretion to suit your needs, should you need them. Awesome. So those are available. I want to make sure everybody knows that a lot of people might not know, because every 3 episodes we do, or oftentimes it's every 3 episodes, but we usually do a musical guest of some sort. Sometimes it's an activist guest, and those don't get as much love as some of our other episodes do, I noticed, just from the views and the responses, right? But guys, there's some amazing testimonies. There's some incredible, talented musicians that have put forth a body of work that are oftentimes used to praise the Most High or get his truth out there, that I think you guys would love to find out more about these guys, right? We're all familiar with the boy bands and the Britney Spears of the past, and the people that are popular in the rap scene and these things today in the spotlight of Hollywood. But not too many people are familiar with these artists that are censored and suppressed. And so we want to just remind you guys that we have some episodes with some awesome talent and good friends of ours that we'd love it if y'all go check those out when you get a chance.
Awesome. Big shout out to L Wilkins 25 dropping a super sticker. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Mrs. Griffin, you are appreciated.
That's right. We call that circular supports.
Cool, man. I like it. Well, Gary Martin says he had a comment here on our Uncommon Ground Facebook page. He says, "My boys are on this channel. This was always one of my most favorite studies as Torah and the biblical flat earth is concerned. And Sean knows how to keep it real and in context. Love you guys. As a bonus, check out WesBlazeMuziK. What's up, Sean? What's up, Wes? Love you guys. Gary, Mr. Martin, we love you too. You are appreciated. You're our boy too."
Nice. Joe said, "Hi there. I love what you guys are doing. I'm speaking these truths for over 15 years. 13 years ago, I helped teach a college and career class at a local church. In that class, I discussed almost everything you guys are discussing today, including the alien invasion. It's great to see the younger generation catching on and ushering in the Great Awakening." Oh, that's cool. I'm wondering if that college and career class at that church allowed you to keep speaking after the first session. So
there were a lot more liberties back then, right? People weren't so contained to the Common Core curriculum of certain aspects like that, right? So, Joe, you are appreciated, brother. Yeah. Zach and Rosie Fisher, they comment and say, "I've been binge watching all these episodes of Uncommon Ground, right? And have almost caught up to watching live. And they say it's seriously life-changing content." Man, I never would have thought I'd hear something like that what we do helps to make lives better. But that is the purpose. That's the goal. We want to edify you with the Father's truth.
Yep.
Thank y'all.
We're so grateful to you guys that are being blessed by this. You know, there's different mindsets and how people learn differently. You know, some people, they got to hear messages about how much God loves them, and that changes their life. Some people, they got to hear and understand the sacrifice that Yeshua made on the cross for us, and that changes their life. Some people, they got to understand why Yeshua made that sacrifice to become our high priest and fulfill everything in the law and the prophets. And that becomes that rooting and that grounding of their faith. Other people need to understand why the creation model is mentioned over 500 times in scripture and how that plays out when the Messiah returns, because that's a huge key point of our faith. And it's just like, so yeah, we're so happy that people are blessed by this info.
Myself as well. Yep, I've said it before, but just to remind you guys, I was somebody that didn't know for sure that I was a believer. Always had that mustard seed of faith, but wasn't confident in the Bible and the validity of it, and whether Christ is the Son of the Most High, like everybody was saying all my life. But the Father used His truth of His creation to lead me to His truth and to Him and to His Son, and I did not know them like I do today, at least, until I was looking into that and checked out the biblical cosmology and the creation model. Shout out Eric Rice in the chat, by the way. Thank you for your super chat as well, brother. Much love to you. Hey, if you would, Sean, if we could go ahead and bring in our guests. Surprise, surprise. Let's do that right now before the video.
Welcome, Michael Solomon.
We got a special guest.
Hey.
Today. What's happening, brother? We're so grateful that you could join us. How are you tonight?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael Solomon runs a company called Canon Quest. Would you give us a brief synopsis of what you do over there?
Sure. Canon Quest is a Bible study tool specifically designed to do two things. Number one, serve as a study aid to Scripture, for Scripture, and as a competitor to the secular media. So I use my skills as a 3D animator, illustrator, photographer, which I've been doing for the last 30 years. And I pump that into Canon Quest to really show the glory and the beauty of Yah's word. And that's what Canon Quest is. It's activity books, trading cards, posters, and a board game.
Fantastic, brother. So appreciate you letting us know. Yep. The link is in the description for canonquest.com, where you can find Michael's work. You also have items for purchase over there where they can also get their hands on some of your content and material, right?
Yes.
That's awesome, bro. Yeah, I got to get me some of those because I couldn't think of anybody more perfect for tonight's episode, with the theme being the cartoons, the CGI, the composite images, the animations that were shown. You have, photography, even you have a background in a lot of these things. And so your opinion and your understandings and experience in these fields are really respected and appreciated, especially for what we're doing tonight. So thank you for being here again. But that being said, we got a trailer teaser for tonight's episode that we're going to get into. I added a little bit of humor to the end of it. Did you pull that up, my friend?
Can do. And real quick, Michelle Wilcox, thank you for your super chat. We really appreciate that.
Another one. They're flowing in tonight, guys. You guys are good.
Look at this photograph. Look at this photograph. Look at this photograph. Look at this photograph. Every time I do, it makes me laugh. 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 I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. It's time to say it. Time to say it. Time to say it. Goodbye. Goodbye. Look at this photograph.
Oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. That's nice and shiny. Oh, go figure. Look at this. Yeah, look at this. Oh, would you look at that? Just look at it. Just look at it.
Yeah, it's sad.
Would you look at it? I was so mad. Would you look at this? You know what I mean? Oh, would you look at this? Oh, would you look at that? Oh, look at that. What an idiot. Would you look at this? Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at this. Look at that.
Get from behind
Look at that.
and you can't do it.
Oh, look at this. Look at that.
Yeah,
look at
see,
this.
And if you tell that to the cop,
Look at that. You got to look at it this way, okay? You just got to look at it.
Oh, look at this. Look at that. Got some people cracking up in the chat. And yes, several people also wanted to remind us that Mr. Michael Solomon absolutely has an amazing show with the brother Chris over at Take on the World on Take on the World TV. And it's called Flat Out Insights. You guys do a lot of great work over there. I've enjoyed many of y'all's shows. Mr. Michael.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. For sure. Thank y'all for reminding us in the chat. Yeah, we want to make sure y'all know, check out Take on the World TV YouTube channel as well. You can find Michael on that as well. But nonetheless, where do we start tonight? Look at this photograph, right? Every time I do, it makes me laugh because is it a photograph at all? In a genuine, unedited sense. But Mr. Sean, would you please read this from Sir Fred Hoyle in 1948? Oh, you're muted, bro.
I was still on mute. Sorry, guys.
You're good.
So Freddie says, once a photograph of the Earth taken from outside is available, we shall, in an emotional sense, acquire an additional dimension. Once let the sheer isolation of the Earth become plain to every man, whatever his nationality or creed, and a new idea as powerful as any in history will be let loose. What a bunch of gobbledygook.
I think he's alluding to the point, right? It's assumed going into his statement here that at the point in 1948, there was no photograph of the Earth from the outside of it, looking at the Earth in quote unquote space. Yeah. They had no genuine unedited photograph like that at 1948.
But Paramount in the 1920s had a model already made.
Right.
They did in Universal Pictures.
Or excuse me, maybe Universal. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the next slide.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. You're
good. We're always thinking about the same. See, guys in the audience, so many times I don't have the chance to go through all the slides before the show starts. So these moments like this just show that Wes and I are in the same thought process.
We are in sync, like bye. So
don't make me have the hair. the macaroni hair.
The Justin Timberlake little
JT's
head. Okay. I won't make you have that.
Somebody glued some ramen to his head.
Cry me a river. Well, so a Universal Picture is, a Comcast NBC Universal company. And from the years 1927 to 1936, they did indeed have a spinning ball Earth as their logo and introduction to their pictures, their movies and shows that they did. But as we said, there wasn't, even up until 1948, a decade or more after this, they still hadn't had a genuine photograph, but they were using animations to depict this understanding of the shape of creation.
It's amazing.
It's interesting. Yeah, this is actually even an updated rendition. Probably, I think it was a lot more grainy, such as this photo.
Yeah.
But Mr. Michael Solomon, would you read this little slide here about this image we're looking at?
Sure. In 1946, German rocket scientist Werner von Braun V2 rocket was lifted up with a 35 millimeter. Was fitted with a 35 millimeter movie camera and allegedly flew 65 miles up and captured this incredible shot.
Incredible! Look at those grains. Super grainy detail.
Yeah, with a 65 millimeter. That's the best he could do. Wow.
Yeah, 35.
Help us out, Michael. 65 millimeter. Can we get a comparison?
I'm sorry, 35 millimeter with 65 millimeter. With 65 miles up. 35 millimeter movie camera is a pretty big negative. Okay, and when it comes to photography, bigger is better. The bigger the film, or nowadays the bigger the sensor, the more detail you can capture. So getting a grainy shot like this with especially as well lit as it is, with 35 millimeter makes no sense. So that alone tells me sounds fake to me.
And Werner von Braun later became, right, a couple decades after this, he became the original director of NASA, did he not?
He did. But his whole career was interesting, especially when he was talking to his assistant close to his death. He started talking about things that did not jive with his job. He started to doubt a lot. Well, not doubt, but he was talking against what he was actually doing and what he had done with NASA. And of course, his gravestone is really interesting.
That's right. Yep. Psalm 119, no, 19:1, isn't it? The heavens
Yep.
declare the glory of God and the firmament shows his handiwork. That is the verse ingrained on to Warner von Braun's tombstone. We've covered that in an episode in the past. And yeah, we talked about some of that, but I think it's interesting that they chose to present this photograph to the people in a slant, even though it's a perfectly flat horizon there.
Right.
They've cocked it to the side and diagonal presentation so that it appears as if you're looking at like one of the sides of the earth, right?
Yeah, just a
Like a
section of a curve. That's what they're
Right.
trying to do.
And Sean, if you'll go to the next slide, they've even taken more of those. I think this was a couple years later when the United States also sent up a similar rocket and they caught more footage. And so they took a lot of these flat pieces of land, and some of them do look like they have a little bit of curve to them. But as we'll find out later, it's toward the end of the episode, we'll talk about some different kinds of camera lenses that could
Sure.
provide that effect. With a really wide angle lens, you get a little bit of distortion on the edges to where it does look like it's not completely perfectly flat. However, mostly flat images that they've now combined and pasted together in this article to try to depict a curved ball-shaped Earth, or part of it at least, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Basically, what they did here was it looks like high altitude photography,
Right.
and they sort of pieced it together to give it a curvature. Clever trick, and to someone who is not aware of, does not understand the dynamics of photography, it looks very convincing.
Sure. Would you also say it would be a lot easier to get good detailed images like this, photographs like this from, let's say, maybe a stationary balloon that's sent up, like a high altitude weather balloon, versus a rocket that's moving 1,000 miles an hour? Or do you think?
Of course, the getting stills like this with the clarity of each one of these stills, from a rocket traveling at that high speed, your shutter speed has got to be fast, man.
Sure.
And it would be a lot easier with a nice slow balloon, and you wouldn't even have to take long exposures. And it really depends on when they were taking it, because film went through a progression as far as sensitivity, which is called ISO.
Yeah.
So back yonder, ISO 25 was considered fast, man. So there's no way you're going to shoot, because back then that was the highest speed they're going to get. So there's no way you're going to shoot at ISO 25 with this rocket going at hundreds of miles an hour. It's just not going to happen.
Gotcha.
Now, Michael, could you help me understand, or maybe Wes, you may know the official narrative as well, with these types of photos, like they're claiming it's on a rocket. So in addition to what Michael just explained, the implausibility of the shutter speed being available at that time, where did the rocket go? How did they retrieve the film undamaged? What's going on here?
Those are some of the questions I had, which caused me to then ask, would it be feasible in that time frame, 1948, for a rocket, thousands of miles speed per hour? Is it feasible for it to be able to get such clear images and photographs like this? So I would propose it's very possible, strongly possible, that they just took them from high altitude weather balloons and claimed that it's from a rocket, but can't prove it. It's just a thought.
Also, you have to take into account different, we're going with the heliocentric narrative here. So you have to take into account cosmic rays and different types of radiation that can affect the film. Even with the Hasselblad camera that they used on the moon landing, the people at Hasselblad actually proudly announced that there was no special shielding or anything done to the camera or any special type of film to deal with the extremes of hot and cold and all the radiation coming down on that film. Yet those pictures were gorgeous. So
that's why there's a part of me that thinks that this isn't even actual images spliced together, but it's just paintings.
Very well could be.
Highly possible. Highly possible.
Yep. That reminds me of what you were just saying of the Apollo missions, and like specifically if you were to go and watch a documentary like Astronauts Gone Wild by Bart Sibrel, and he poses the question of what about the Van Allen radiation belts, like you were just talking about the radiations and stuff, and those are supposedly able to, like, powerful enough and harmful enough to like fry electronics, let alone radiate somebody to an unhealthy or toxic place, from what they tell us about the Van Allen radiation belts. But yet, without any understanding of them in the Apollo missions, they supposedly flew right through them with no harmful effects whatsoever, is what they claim.
Yeah, they just gunned it and went really fast.
Well,
Yeah.
guys, like Robert D in the live chat is saying that they weren't discovered yet, so therefore it had no effect.
That's what it was. Yeah. You got to discover them before.
I remember that. That's hilarious. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to that in the future. More on that in a moon landing episode coming soon to an uncommon ground near you. Nonetheless, what's on the next one? Wanted to talk a little bit about NASA's budget. Right, we were just looking at 1948. NASA was formed right around the end of the 50s, early 60s, and we're getting into some of the budget here. So if you look at this huge spike, the numbers are a little small at the bottom of the screen, but that's right there at the end of the 60s. Coming into the 70s, you get a huge spike in the NASA federal budget. And it went from 20 billion, probably in 1965 or so, up to 35 billion, then up to over 40 billion right there in 1969 for the moon landing era, so-called. But since then, right, it's fluctuated a little bit. But since about the 90s, it started leveling off, averaging around 20 billion a year. $20 billion. That's a little over $50 million a day, right?
Yeah.
And so what have
I did the math one time, and up to, I think it was 2018 when I did the math, and it was over 900 billion in total since the start of NASA, and that's just NASA. That's not including all the supplementary or tangent programs that would be connected to NASA that also gets funding. So we're talking almost $1 trillion in taxpayer money over the course of the last 60 years. So this is a massive fraud on the people.
Roughly $62 million a day.
Yeah,
right. A day. I'm in the wrong business, dudes. I mean,
well, you're in the right one for the father, right? Because these guys are on the father's side.
I'm not going to sell myself. I used to want to work for NASA, and I just never got there. And now I see why. Because at the time, I was a space cadet. So I was like, wow, I'm an illustrator photographer. I wasn't into 3D at that time. And I said, they would love me, because I know they did conceptual illustrations, but it didn't occur to me that they tried to pass it off as real. So, but I never really got there.
Did you apply for any of their departments, or did you?
Sure did.
See, I could be wrong. And obviously, I have nothing to back the statement up, just a thought. But it makes me wonder if part of their filtering process is within their, their personality evaluation, which they can determine, are you easily brainwashed or not?
Yeah, that probably got in the way.
Right.
Even though I wasn't really awakened to the lie of heliocentrism until 2015. So that was like years later. But I wasn't easily fooled. I mean, there were still a lot of things I didn't believe in. And so I'm sure I put up some red flags, and it was like, no, he's not good.
And I do want to clarify for everyone listening out there, I'm not saying that every single person that works at NASA is brainwashed, but I'm just saying there's a level of influence that certain people can. It's kind of like any hypnotist will tell you, some people are highly influenceable and some are not. And there's ways they can quickly discern this just by reactions, and also when they get them on stage, they can quickly discern this. And so I would not put it past the part of their evaluation process. It's certain key metrics and indicators. Obviously, they don't use the language of hypnotism or brainwashing. They use other HR resource language terms that seem very stale. But basically, they're choosing people specifically for certain departments. And then, of course, the astronauts. I mean, of all the people in the world, there's only been 100 plus astronauts or whatever. So clearly, I would think those guys are highly susceptible to suggestion and direction, which is why they're chosen. Yeah.
If not true believers and know exactly what they're doing.
They're cool. Or if just absolutely not a part of the actual cult, no behind the scenes info. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
As Masons are sworn to be able to do, should they require them to.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a future episode. Like I talked about the moon landing, we'll do more on a future episode. But since we're talking about these images that we've been provided with over the years, as we said, 1948, there was no image of the Earth from space, quote unquote. No photograph had been taken yet. So they had to gear up on what am I trying to say here? They had to put together some missions so that they could in turn pretend to show the people, hey, we finally got some pictures of Earth from space or from the alleged moon. And when you put them all together like this, I don't know, what are your thoughts on what we're looking at here, Sean?
Well, obviously the first one that sticks out to me is the eclipse. But I mean, that seems pretty silly. But I mean, didn't Skiba take one of these and find the Photoshop box? Was that
He
one of these
did. He
images?
did. Yeah, that's in about 5 slides.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the first thing that comes to me is like anybody can. I mean, basic skills can make this. Obviously, back then in the '60s, not every person had Photoshop or any access to any type of apps that do that. It wasn't even a thought in people's brains for the most part of like, how could I? Oh, I've done that before. I could easily make that myself. So I can see how in that mindset in that generation of that era, people would just swallow this whole if the government told them, "Hey, we took a picture from the moon. Here's what the Earth looks like."
Oh yeah, and all the media campaigns to propagate the propaganda for sure. So yeah, and if you could you blow it up? Could you pull our faces off and enlarge the image? All right, so if we look at Apollo 11 to Apollo 14, they're on the top right, and the one directly underneath it, it's actually the same exact cloud patterns and Earth and everything. They just put a slightly different tint on the color of the ocean or whatever, right? They didn't even bother changing the image out. And then once you get down to Apollo 17, that's a cartoon compared to the other ones, definitely, right?
Yeah. And they don't really need to control consistency because that's the greatest ally to anyone looking for the truth, open to the truth, are the inconsistencies of NASA. And they don't really have to control the continuity of their narrative because they know that 90% of the population is completely convinced of their validity. And so they really don't need to. They hold us in great disdain. It's like, oh, those idiots, we could just show them anything. Yeah. And to be perfectly frank, for the most part, they're right. I believed it. I was totally for it. But once my eyes were open, oh man, was I mad.
You were just a baby when these missions, the Apollo missions, right? Yeah. You were still real young.
Yep.
Yes. Do you guys know if those Hasselblad cameras that were supposedly strapped to the astronauts' chests on these missions, if they had some sort of filter that would allow them to filter out the incredibly bright radiating light from the moon?
No, they did not. They did not, because I watched an interview with the actual designers of the camera. All they just did was they took a standard Hasselblad medium format camera and they simply modified it according to the need that NASA alleged that they had. But there was no special filtering, there was no shielding, there was no special increased casing strength. The film, first of all, film shouldn't have been used at all. Okay, because it would have completely melted. All right, because the temperatures, they were like 273 degrees Kelvin on one end and on the other. Okay, so there's no way it should have survived. And you're right. The closer you get to a light source, the brighter that light source is. So based on how bright the moon is standing on it, you're going to need some powerful neutral, what in my field are called neutral density filters. You're going to need some powerful NDs to deal with that. And yet none of it was used. Now their helmets had filters, but the camera didn't.
Now, Michael, that's of course, you're assuming that actual NASA calculates the inverse square law of light within their thought process, but they don't.
Say they do. But
they also say
really,
that they're legit. So we'll take that for what it is.
Right.
You know, I think it's funny because the not only is the surface of the moon supposed to be extremely bright, but like look at number 15. Look at Apollo 15 picture there at the bottom left.
They barely tried.
Like yeah, right.
So you're telling me that the sun is on the back side of the Earth to the point where it's creating that that halo of a glow that looks like an eclipse over the top side of the curvature of the Earth. But your Hasselblad 1960 camera has night vision to get this clarity and see this, but yet you can't see the surface of the moon without any light on it, but yet there's no stars either.
Right, I was just about
Right.
to say they can get the
Right.
sliver
Right.
of the light there on the Earth,
Yeah.
but no stars are
So
showing up.
they get the light aperture that low, but they still never can pick up stars.
Yeah.
Because
So
if you can
all
pick up
none
a
of them make sense.
crescent, if you can pick up a crescent that bright, you're going to get stars because
Yeah.
the stars are the same brightness. So because they say, well, it's an exposure issue. No, I'm not buying that. No, it's not. Because if you can get that bright light, you can get a star.
There you
One
go.
or two.
From
So
an experienced
didn't they-
photographer himself.
Didn't they say those cameras, like, just wasn't it 2017, 2016, they claimed to release like 60,000 photos from the moon missions from those cameras on their chests?
Right.
You guys remember that story?
Yeah,
And
I remember.
and people did the math, and they were like, they would have had to be taking a picture like every second they were walking around to get that many photos, and they were all like
Right.
immaculate clarity with like 4D imagery. And you're
Right.
sitting there going, what kind of battery is in that camera on their chest that allows them to continually be going?
Now, the camera itself did not. That camera at that time, that Hasselblad, did not have a battery, unless you count the battery used for the light meter. But
So then you're saying it was they had to manually do this the whole time.
that was mechanical. Yeah.
Wow.
Totally mechanical. So
Isn't
they
it
probably
pretty
had a
cool?
shutter release, you know. If I had a shutter release where it's a cable that connects to the camera, so they wouldn't have to directly touch the camera because they already have it on their chest and they're walking around with it. Okay, so you're increasing camera shake at that point. So you want to use a camera release. There was no electronics in the camera except maybe the light meter. Okay, but then the light meter wouldn't do them any good because you have to view it through the viewfinder, and they didn't have anything like a HUD or anything. So the inconsistencies abound. I mean,
There was
that
no
camera-
Jarvis. There was no Iron Man interface inside of there.
No, absolutely not. There was no heads-up display in that helmet.
Right. Well, so we got NASA and JAXA, right? The Japanese space agency that also officially released an official Earthrise in 2014 to compare and contrast with NASA's official Earthrise in 1968. I got it. So if you were to look at these next to each other, did Japan claim to land a man on the moon, or is this just from an orbiter or a? Do y'all recall?
I thought it was just an orbiter type thing.
Just an orbiter.
So. Yeah, I think so
So
as well.
apparently the cameras have degressed in quality because now it's darker, even though supposedly from this angle it looks like the sunlight should be lighting up the moon because it's lighting up that whole side of the Earth.
Right.
But yeah, so the camera quality is worse apparently.
Right. Yep.
Just as kind of point out, right?
It's actually the quality is less and then more because they have more detail as far as the craters are concerned.
Sure.
but the exposure is lousy and it's kind of on the green side. I don't know what's going on there. But it's really, I mean, if my students turned in anything like this, I was like, dude, what is this, a proof? I mean, is this a rough draft or what? Because it's really shoddy work. It really is.
This will be where we need the Donald Trump meme where he's like, the camera was made in China.
Listen, so yeah, it is shoddy work, but it has to be. So if we were to go to the next slide, we want to just take a look now. I really contemplated putting this clip in here, but I think as much as we had, I just want to recommend everybody go check out. I mentioned earlier Bart Sibrel. He had a documentary called "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon," where he exposes this footage that was released by mistake, quite possibly, because it really just reveals and exposes NASA's deceptive endeavors when they're trying to show a picture of the Earth on the way to the moon, allegedly during the Apollo 11 spacecraft missions. Astronauts Michael Collins, Neil Armstrong, and Buzz Aldrin in 1969 were in this footage aboard the Apollo 11 spacecraft. It's implied that the camera is like up against the window, portraying the blackness surrounding the Earth as the darkness of space. But if you go to the next slide, Sean, then they zoom out, right? The Earth, and leaving the viewer to assume that we are seeing a wider frame against an even larger swath of pitch black space. And they zoom out until the Earth is tiny there. But do you see what this glare almost looking, the light at the top center of the screen?
Yeah, right.
That's actually you're going to see it clearly, more clearly in the next slide, but that's actually a fog light from the inside of the cabin, because the astronauts turn the lights on, and we now see the apparent sphere of the Earth turn into a small window of the exact same size. What appeared to be outer space surrounding a planet was really just a darkened interior cabin framing an illuminated circular window, so that it made it appear. Now, the video, if you were to check out on the funny thing happened on the way to the moon, right? It illustrate it all better, and you can see it in real time or whatever, to where you can definitely see that they were being deceptive, that they were at one end of a longer shuttle, one end, and had the darkened cabin inside, turned out all the lights, and now they just have one small circle window at the very end, and they're taking a picture through that window as if they're looking at a sphere of the Earth off in the distance of space, whereas they were right over the Earth, over the plane of the Earth, and they got a small window revealing just a portion of the plane of the Earth, and it's deceptive. Right. So that's a good one to check out. Very interesting stuff. You mentioned this one a little bit earlier, Sean, that Rob Skiba, shout out, dearly beloved, passed away, that he had put together a presentation where all you got to do is go and take some of the official images of the Earthrise and whatnot. This one, I believe, was from Apollo 17, he said, to where you just take those images, put the files into a editing app like Photoshop, or these days you can even do it with a phone app, image editing app, and just adjust the levels, change out the contrast and the brightness, saturation, whatever you got to do, until you start to see these squares and these pixelated blotches and blocks around the image, right? What would you say that's indicative of, Michael?
Compositing.
So
compositing. I mean, it's pure and simple. So they took an image of the Earth and put it on a black background, and what you see is the image, the edges of the image. Once you adjust levels, because that's really what Rob did, and I mimicked that on a Flat Out Insights show once, but I did it with a Hubble telescope image, and what you're seeing are the edges of the I guess would be a ping, because there's nothing around it. So you're seeing the edges of the image once you adjust the levels. You can use levels, you can use curves, you can use a histogram controller, but almost any program can do this now. This is easy stuff. Yeah. Now, I will say this though, since Rob and since 2015, NASA has cleaned up their act. So it's harder to find these mistakes now, okay? Yeah. Because it's easy to clean this stuff up. You simply mask it and you literally just wipe it off, right, with a brush, or you can do real simple and just erase it with an eraser too. But NASA, when a lot of people say, well, the Flat Earth movement didn't accomplish anything. No. We played a big part in NASA cleaning up their act. That's not a good thing, but still, they responded to us kooks. Okay, yeah. If we were so crazy, why was NASA jumping to our tune? So they have a ton of images.
Was Congress on having website. An entire briefing with YouTube CEO about how to stop FE videos from being recommended on the YouTube algorithm?
Juniper Downs, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, if it was such an inconsequential nonsense, people questioning the shape of creation, like, why is Congress trying to have a special meeting on it?
Right, exactly.
Another response to the uproar, right? Because in 2014-15, the term flat Earth was one of the most searched terms on Google, right? They had to do something for damage control. So yeah, this is one of many examples where you guys could take some of the initial released images, at least, like we say, they've cleaned up their act a little bit since then, but some of the early on images that they would release to the public, you could take these into an app, raise the levels, show the clear copy and paste work that they did.
Actually, you can do it now with Hubble telescope images. What I did with a video that they had put out of the Hubble telescope, literally zooming into the cosmos. Actually, I didn't know a Hubble telescope was a zoom lens. And so they're zooming into it, And so as I adjusted the levels, each stage of the zoom, each constellation or grouping of constellations had that same rectangle around it. Okay. So all they did was they put it into a compositing program or a video editing program. You can do it with Premiere or any type of video editing program. You don't even need anything as complicated as After Effects or DaVinci. So they simply took still images and they enlarged them.
Right. Animated them with a zoom transition is all they had to do, right?
With a zoom transition, or simply scaled them up. Okay. Because the images that they produce on the NASA site are very high resolution. So that gives you the advantage of zooming in and not losing resolution and it's getting grainy or anything. But it was really easy to debug that.
Well, I mean, until it comes to their rocket launches on the launch pad, right? All that film is not high resolution, can't be zoomed in.
True.
No, that's hilarious too.
Same with SpaceX.
Yeah. Miniatures.
Yep. Models and oftentimes animation too when they do those things. Well, speaking of animation, if you fast forward to 2000, the year 2000, we had the GOES satellite. GOES is one of NASA's satellite programs, where they say that this true color image shows North and South America as they would appear from space 22,000 miles above the Earth. The image is a combination of data from the two satellites. NASA's Terra satellite collected the land surface data over 16 days, while NOAA's geostationary operational environmental satellite, the GOES, produced a snapshot of the Earth's clouds. And the image is then credited and created by a guy named Rito and Nazmi and Merritt over at NASA GOES Satellite Foundation or whatever the case. But yeah, they'll tell you this is from NASA's website. They'll tell you that this image produced in 2000 was collected from data and pieced together by image editors.
Hey, have you guys ever watched any like murder mysteries and detective type shows? Do you guys?
Sure.
Okay. So, it's like a common trope that the guilty party, the liars, always provide way too many details.
They do. Yep.
And if you ever look at NASA's site or any of their publications and the things like it's just tries to overwhelm you with all the little details of like, but because remember this shuttle had this specs of this and this, and it'll just go into like paragraph after paragraph, and you're like, the average any other industry, specifically with the government, right? They don't give you the all right. So for example, in 2010, when they spent $600 million building the national health website that they're going to use for Obamacare, right? That could have been built for like less than $1 million. They ended up spending $600 million on it, and then they tried to provide like the data as far as everything that was going to go into it, and it's still not up and functioning. But it was just page after page after page after page of just stuff that the average person has no clue how to reconcile on their brain. Not just the terminology of that specific industry, but also what are they going to do with all the. I mean, obviously there's a few autistic level eccentric NASA fanboys out there that soak up all this little detailed information and try to regurgitate it in the comment threads. But to the average person, like they have no clue all the little details that are always involved. And I think it's on purpose to overwhelm you with a sense of authority and science. You know what I'm saying? And it's just and ultimately they just want, hey man, we're 22,000 miles out. We took this amazing photo. It's awesome.
But then they intentionally let you know that this isn't really a genuine photo that's taken, as a single frame either. And I think they do that on purpose too. I think they're oftentimes contradicting themselves just to add to the confusion. And then it divides the people because there's the select few who realize, hey, you guys notice this isn't real, and they never are, right? And then the rest of the people are like, oh, whatever. And then so they love to intentionally let you know that they're fraudulent as often as they can.
That's actually a really good point, because when they inundate you with all this silly information, you get two basic reactions from the public: apathy, where they just, I don't care, this is just too much. Let me go eat dinner, or they simply say, well, I don't know what they're talking about, but they're scientists, so I'll just believe them. Okay. So and they know exactly
carted in on a wagon into the
exactly.
floor. Yeah.
Yep.
There's 5,000 pages. They know the average person is not going to take the time to investigate it, read it, or check up on the congressman that's voting for it. They expect you to tune out. They want to overwhelm you with info to tune you out. And it's just, to me, it's like, yeah, it reminds me of, I had a series I did last year, the Investigating Babylon series, and I was trying to talk about the ancient, not only is literally the ball a symbol as a part of their occult, but the whole system of heliocentricity was just stolen from ancient Hinduism. And and then furthermore, when you look into the pagan gods and all the stories and the mythos from the different cultures about them, it's an overwhelming amount of information.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that same thought process as to where they've sterilized all the words to take the religious ideals out of it. Now it's all technical information. They're still using all the symbols of the religion that they serve, but they've sterilized all the language to no more chakras, no more third eye, no more the milky white universal floating ocean that Shiva flies on. None of that stuff. But now it's sterilized sciencey words that does make you tune out. It's crazy.
Yeah.
To give it that wider appeal.
That's right. Yeah. I got to say, this looks like the least scientific images of all the ones we're going to look at tonight. For one, just because it has a really cartoony appeal to it. It looks very much like a painting and not based on real photographs at all of any kind. They even went as far as to add this little moon in the top right. It's like really pixelated. It almost looks like my shirt here, right?
Yeah.
Line that had God, and you got the 8-bit planets.
The 8-bit moon.
Yep. This is available, by the way, in our Teespring and the description of the video below. But you got a really, really artistic, cartoony looking image here. But if we could move on to the next one. Back to the budget deal this year. Did you guys know? Michael, would you read this?
Congress appropriation for fiscal year 2022 increased NASA's annual budget by 3% to about $24 billion, short of 7% increase the Biden administration sought. The agency's Science Mission Directorate received a 4% increase to $7.6 billion, which was itself short of the 9% boost requested April 8th.
Yeah, so NASA got bumped up to 24 billion this year, 24 billion a year, and that was less than half of the percentage of increase that they asked for, right? If you go to the next slide, Sean, we got a projection for what they're asking for, and I know you guys can't see these numbers. Yeah, it's a little better now. At the very bottom, the totals of the projected budget request. Right, this is what NASA is asking for in 2023. Next year, they're going to bump it up almost $1 billion a year until 2026, where they'll arrive at 27 billion, 0.27 million, right, of the total budget. And so they're just going to keep ramping it up. I'm sure that has part to do with inflation that we've seen skyrocketing over the past years.
Literally the same people that print the money.
Yeah.
There should be no inflation. Okay, yeah. If this is definitely like clearly money laundering scheme here.
Yeah,
of course, that's exactly what it is. Because I mean, what are they spending the money on? I mean,
that's right.
Have you seen the moon lander? That thing is horrible. My 8-year-old could do a better job.
Exactly. So, it looks like curtain rods and foil.
Yeah. Now, mind you, their props are a little better, but I've often said NASA is the worst entertainment organization in the history of entertainment, because that's basically what they are. They're propaganda arm of the government, of the military, actually. And but they get much higher budgets than any production company in the entertainment industry,
or even a much higher budget than any other space agency in the world by far. If you go to the next slide, I got that one next. NASA's budget is without parallel. Budgets of the world's largest space agencies in 2017. This is 2017, NASA was 19 billion that year, whereas the next largest space agency, the European Space Agency, ESA, was only 6.1 billion. Roscosmos was 2.5, the Chinese 2 billion. And so on and so forth. Down to JAXA, the Japanese, 1.4 billion is all they got. So it's just as if the propaganda is bought and paid for leaps and bounds over the other countries of the world in NASA.
So JAXA can put a rover on the moon, but we can't?
We lost the technology to do so, and it was a
Oh,
painful
I forgot
process
it.
to get it back again. But they're already, I don't know if you've seen, but they're talking
No,
about
they
doing it again.
destroyed the technology.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
all that money, and they just destroyed it. Wow.
yeah.
And they actually said it, which was the part that really cracked me up. But my thing is, NASA's 19 billion, is some of that money going to be used for Space Force?
You know, I don't
Who's
know.
paying for Space Force?
I haven't looked into the budget for Space Force, because to me, like I said, all the supplementary tangent programs connected to NASA.
Mhm.
You know, I know that the U.S. Federal U.S. budget for the military as a whole is like over 800 billion every year. So I don't know if some of that's delegated to the Space Force or not, since they're technically another branch of the U.S. military,
Right.
which is
How about that?
nonsense, right? So
It's total
just real
nonsense.
quick, we had a person in the live chat, Kava Time, is saying, you know, what could they do with $27 billion? What could they do for the homeless around the world? You know, and it just reminds me of the heartbreak, you know, like our Messiah Yeshua says, you're always going to have the poor with you. And it's
Right.
because when wicked men rule, they oppress mankind and they steal from them. You know, it's like this. Someone did the math and they said for $6 billion, you could clean up all the homeless in the United States.
Yep.
And that gives them a decent residence of shelter, get them integrated into some sort of job. And like, it could be done. Right.
Mhm.
And you know
Sure.
how like they're always all the different bills, they're adding on $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Like, how much did we send to Ukraine recently? Who knows? Like,
Yeah.
you know, just think about like all we could have cured not cured, but we could have taken everyone that's presently homeless, provided them with some sort of housing, and integrated them back into society. Now I get it, there's a lot of addiction involved with a lot of homeless communities, but the point
Sure.
is, if they really wanted to, this money could be going towards things that we could actually quantify and see within our society. But that's not the point. The point is,
It really is. That's right.
Yeah.
So you asked a good question here a little bit ago, Michael. You said, what are they really doing with all this money? And so, you know, point of tonight's episode is to show you all a little bit of what they're presenting the people with this budget that they're taking from the taxpayers, right? Every time you pay your federal income tax, I'd imagine your sales taxes, every time you buy or spend money, parts of that percentages are going over to NASA to then in turn deceive us and our children.
Yeah.
And that's the sickest part. So
they're funding Nickelback. It's a travesty.
Look at this photograph. Well, every time I do, it makes me laugh because it's not a photograph at all, right? So
Right.
if you go to the next slide, NASA Blue Marble 2.0 is what that one is. Many of you are probably familiar with this image and the creator of it and what he said about it, but this might be a review for some of you. Some of you might not know about this at all, but we're happy to share with you guys that this is not a photograph, and the person who created it has gone on record, and he's on NASA's website. If you will go to the next slide again, on NASA's.gov and their center for their visualizers and their data analyzers and visualizers. Robert Simmons, just a quick, we don't have to read all of this here, but they say, what do you do, right? Robert Simmons, lead data visualizer and information designer, senior program analyst. So he works with computer programs, and the visualizer is just Photoshopper, basically, right? This is his job title. If you go to the next slide, you could read just that highlighted part maybe for me, Sean, or
So
the top question and the highlighted part.
Yeah. So Robert Simmons was asked, what do you do and what is most interesting about your role here at Goddard? How do you help support Goddard's mission? Excuse me, guys. It's so funny to me. It's hard for me to keep a straight face. Whew. Because remember I was talking about the look of someone easily susceptible to influence?
Yeah.
So he says, my role is to make imagery from Earth sciences data, because we science here. No, he said, my role is to make imagery from Earth sciences data. I turn data into pictures. So, right. Michael, have you ever turned data into pictures as a professional image creator?
No.
You turned ideas turn into
sure.
pictures,
you take
right?
concepts and you illustrate the concepts. You may take a several images and manipulate them to create another image, but raw data. I mean, is he talking streams of numbers? I mean,
yeah.
no.
So have you ever, when you watch The Matrix, Michael, could you see the numbers floating down and be like, "Oh, brunette,
no,
redhead"?
That's
or
not
you
how
like
it works.
Cypher sitting there? You could read it. You could see the people. No.
Absolutely.
So how do these guys, what kind of training goes involved for someone to get back a bunch of data that's just fed to them? Think about the process, right? These guys are just sitting in their office and they're like, oh, hey, the new reports came in. It's a bunch of old, like, printed out ones and zeros. And they're like, here, look, this is of the Galaxy 539G, and you're like, it's a multi-gaseous galaxy with some red hues. And they're like, oh, sweet, I'll get right on that.
Yeah,
so they take the zeros and ones and make all these fancy photoshopped images. It's not real.
I mean, this guy actually described exactly how he put a globe Earth together. And the way he described it is exactly the way it's done. Whenever I have, I just did an intro for a Facebook talk show, and they had the globe Earth in there. I tried to convince them not to, but they didn't listen to me. So the client. But really what he did was he said, first you take a globe and then you take the continents and you wrap them around the globe. And then you take a layer of clouds and you put the layer of clouds in there. And then and then you take a specular highlight. He actually made a big deal out of that.
Michael, if I could stop you, I hate to interrupt you, but this is all right here in the presentation that we can look at for out of his mouth. Right? Okay. We're even going to play the clip here momentarily. So yeah, you're right. Okay. You're absolutely right. There at the very bottom, it just says, our team is purely about communications. We translate data into a usable and understandable form. So they're just trying to communicate a message and an idea to you. The prophets of NASA are, right? Yep. They want to communicate a message. If you'll go to the next slide, I think
look at the data that they translate. 3,000 CDs worth of information per day.
That's silly.
How many people are translating? How many? What are we looking at here? Is this like an entire 20-story building full of guys like this that translate the data every day? And how do they know which parts of the data? Anyway, I'm going to stop.
Here's exactly what Michael was just saying out of his own mouth on this interview there that's posted on the NASA website, that he says, then, well, let me just, the hard part was creating a flat map of the Earth's surface with 4 months of satellite data. Was that hard to create a flat map of the Earth's surface? I doubt it. But Rito Stockley, now at the Swiss Federal Office of Meteorology and Climatology, did much of this work. I recognize that name from the GOES satellite image from 2000, 2 years prior to this. However, he said, then we wrapped the flat map around a ball. My part was in integrating the surface clouds and oceans to match people's expectations of how Earth looks from space. That ball became the famous blue marble.
Yep.
And if you go to the next one, that's the cue for his quote that we're going to hear in an interview that he's done on video. Right? It is Photoshop, but it has to be, he says. Yep. You can pull that one up, brother. We'll play that clip and hear what he has to say out of his own mouth.
This world is not what you think it is.
Last week, scientists at NASA released this. The shot is compiled from data from NASA's VEERS instrument, which orbits the Earth about every 100 minutes, taking measurements of light coming off the planet. That can be translated into ribbons of imagery like this, and then into one of these. And this is just the latest in NASA's Earth from Space album, which may be one of the most mind-expanding collections of images in human history.
I think the images are very powerful because they make people think about the Earth in a different way.
Then in 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. And it had wide appeal too. For example, it ended up as the default background on the iPhone.
I didn't even know until I bought an iPhone and turned it on and kind of did a little happy dance.
Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
To us, the really cool thing was the data set. Up until that point, there was no realistic color map of the globe anywhere.
So the land layer here comes from
the moderate resolution imaging spectroradiometer aboard Terra.
And the tricky part here was the weather.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it's a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
There was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
and then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space, but I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it.
Simon wants to make the world better too, starting with the atmosphere.
And I'm getting results that I like, but I think it's a little bit exaggerated. So I'm working on some techniques to try to tone it down a little bit.
To make it a little more homey.
And joining me is Ernie Wright, visualizer at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. You're a visualizer and storyteller behind hundreds of NASA illustrations and videos. So give us a brief summary of your multimedia background and your role today at Goddard.
So I work in the Scientific Visualization Studio, and we call that the SVS, so we don't have to say that over and over. The studio creates scientific animations and illustrations using data from NASA missions. And these are videos that are specifically data-driven. So everything you see is a piece of data from a NASA mission.
You start with, as you mentioned, a ton of data, and you figure out the best way to present it. So what is the process like?
Our job basically is to place that data in context. I mean, when it comes from the spacecraft, it's all just zeros and ones. And we like to make it look a little bit like whatever the data is. So if it's something hot, we'll make it red. And if it's water, we'll make it blue, just so it reads for people. And it's easy for them to interpret. And we also are storytellers. You'd think we could just paste this data onto a ball and say, here it is. But we really have to tell the story of the data, what it means, what its significance is, why people should care about it. And so we collaborate with producers and writers and scientists, and we all get together and decide how to present this data in a way that's engaging for the public, in a way that is comprehensible to a public that may not have all the science and technical background that the scientists do. So I have to translate the data into forms that my software can understand. We use basically movie special effects software. So there's no science sort of built into the software. I have to tell it what this data is. And so I make it into image maps and things that can be wrapped onto geometry. And then that software is like having a movie set. So there are cameras and lights, and you decide where to point the camera and how the light should be pointed. Usually it's sunlight, but sometimes it's something else. And I make sure that it's in the right place on a sphere, and then I decide where the camera has to go in order to tell the story. Whatever tells the story. And we call this cinematic visualization. We kind of want to distinguish it from the kind of things that scientists might do at their desk, where they would plot graphs and make things that only scientists love. We're making things that try to communicate to a much wider audience.
You mentioned software a couple of times now. What software tools do you use to organize the data that you're referring to and build those images?
So a lot of us have a background in computer science, and the reason for that is that we have to write our own programs to translate that data. It always comes to us in some weird form that no software can read except the scientist's little desktop thing. So we're constantly having to write software that translates the data, interprets it. We use scripting languages and Python, and all of that's like the first step, just to get the data into a usable form. And then we use off-the-shelf animation and rendering software. So we happen to use Maya for animation. This is the program that sort of displays the set. It has the models in it and the positions of the camera and the lights. And the rendering software, the software that actually writes the pixels into the final image, is RenderMan, which is a piece of software that Pixar makes. It's the same software they use for their movies.
$50 million on the daily, that's the banknote. Just for some computer animation from a space probe. That's a cartoon, all I'm seeing is a fake globe. And NASA never landed on the moon, it was a fake, bro. So peep the show, ain't no sleeping, no, I'm on no dose. I preach the kingdom, I'm still tipping on fofos.
$50 million on the daily, that's the banknote. Just for some computer animation from a space probe, right? So that's some lyrics from one of my songs, but yeah, we can't hear you, Michael. I think you were trying to say something, brother.
He's right. The software Maya is a leading software used in Hollywood for visual effects, character design, environmental design, that sort of thing. RenderMan, yes, was indeed created by Pixar.
Is that software used in the Unreal Engine?
No.
Okay.
Unreal Engine is a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
Maya is more of a traditional subdivision pixel-based. Well, they're all pixel-based, but Unreal is a real-time renderer, meaning you don't really need to render. What you see is what you get immediately. Whereas with Maya, you may create a scene. Once you hit render, it could take hours or days to visualize that image. So yeah, he's speaking the truth. Now, here's an interesting thing. Nowadays, you don't need that. You could spend $100, if that, on a piece of software that can do exactly what Maya does, with no problem. I don't use Maya because it's too expensive. And it's too much of a headache to use. So yeah, but if you notice, he says we're storytellers, and he's right. They're telling a narrative, and they use cinematic software to do it.
Right. They get together with writers and scientists, and they come up with the pictures that they want to communicate to the people with their message, right? So, yep, there it is from the horse's mouth themselves, right? We had Robert Simmons. We had the other guy that's another NASA data visualizer. Just telling you straight up, they wrap images around balls in computer software and show them.
And it's 3D software nowadays. They do it in 3D. 3D is far easier to work with than 2D. You have far more advantages because you can get 2D renders from 3D. But when you're dealing with the Z-axis, because the 2D software dealing with X, Y, but then when you add that Z-axis, when you add dimension into it, your advantages just go sky high. So even before he mentioned Maya, he was talking 3D.
Yep, there it is. Well, so speaking of the theme of animations and cartoons, we just, since this episode started, we had our first audience-created fan art submitted to us based on, what did they say, inspired by the thumbnail from tonight. We'll just call her Miss C. Rice. Shout out Eric Rice and his family over there. His daughter sent this in to us tonight and said that, you know, she wanted to let us see this, that she created some fan art for us. Very sweet of her.
That's good. Awesome. That's good.
Much love, family of the Rices. We appreciate y'all. Cool deal. Well, so on to the next slide, if we can.
So yeah, like I was, I would, that guy's testimony, that whole video we just played, I would really love to see the raw data that they get before they, because he's like, we get it in a form that no program can understand. I'm like, what?
Did you hear him say they have to write their own programs to interpret it?
Yeah. So I'm like, what?
That's ludicrous. No one does that.
Raw data. Have you guys ever seen it?
No.
You know if they've ever published it or put it on anywhere? Because you remember in my Investing in Babylon series, I talked about how in the 1980s they started their own separate NASA department to study Sanskrit for an AI language because they thought it was this perfect language without context. And so it would be great for computer code for AI. And so they were studying ancient Sanskrit from India. And so I'm just like, what is this? I just would love to see whatever data coming in for these scientists.
I even thought of that exact thing, what you just said, Sean, when the guy said that there's no context, or they have to put context to it, right? You said the language of Sanskrit was like something that was contextless.
Yeah, the guy, I can't remember his name, but the guy from NASA that thought it would be perfect for AI said it's specifically because the language of Sanskrit has no context. And I was like, that's interesting for languages. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Well, back to the blue marbles. They did a whole series of them, You know, every so often throughout the years, they released more images of so-called Earth from space that they've titled Blue Marble. This one's from 2007. They gave you a front and a back this time. How about that? Gave you a little more to look at. All the continents represented. Notice on the right side, North America is kind of small up and to the left there. So what are they saying about this image? If you go to the next one, on the Earth Observatory, I can't say it, observatory.nasa.gov. Would you read this, Michael Solomon?
Drawing on data from multiple satellite missions, not all collected at the same time, a team of NASA scientists and graphic artists created layers of global data for everything from land surface to polar sea ice to the light reflected by chlorophyll in the billions of microscopic plants that grow in the ocean. They wrapped these layers around the globe, set it against a black background, and simulated the hazy edge of the Earth's atmosphere, the limb. That appears in astronaut photography of the Earth.
So what I gather here is it says artists created these layers, and then they simulated parts of it. So it's like it sounds like it's all simulated based on so-called photography.
Can you go back to the previous image? Because I spotted something.
Did you?
Okay. On the Earth model, because that's exactly what it is. On the Earth model on the right, if you notice in the middle of the image in that deep blue area, if you look at the clouds down at the bottom of that deep blue area, if you notice, they look exactly the same.
Copy paste, right? Like what's his name? Robert Simmons said he just had to hit Command Z a lot. That's an Apple term for copy paste. Control C.
Actually, Command Z is undo.
Oh, okay.
So he's using Photoshop. That shows me he's an amateur, because Photoshop, when he was using it, Photoshop only had one undo. So he's hitting undo constantly. Okay. But that mistake in those clouds is due to that's a cloning error. It's sloppy.
Yeah.
You're using the cloning tool. It's a real sloppy way to use the cloning tool. Nowadays, you don't really use the cloning tool that much. You use what's called the inpainting tool, which is really a nice way to cover things up and actually see something underneath. The cloning tool actually is better because you can target different sources for the cloning tool much better than you used to. That's a lazy mistake, and it's so obvious it's right there.
It is.
Okay.
I actually noticed something else about the clouds that you might not have noticed if you compare this image to the other blue marble, right? The Robert Simmons blue marble. If you'll go 2 slides up, Sean, next one. They copied and pasted the cloud formation. And you would think for the billions of dollars that we gave them, we could have gotten a new cloud layer. But
I mean, yeah, right.
Wes, remind the audience on the marble on the left. When was this supposed to be created?
That was 2002, and then the one on the right is 2007.
Wow.
So yeah, 5 years apart, $100 billion in between there that they were getting, and they couldn't give us a new cloud layer.
Wow.
They added the same exact one and just wrapped it on the
lazy,
side of the northern hemisphere. So there's that, and then there's one other thing about this on the eastern hemisphere, so-called, that they said in the clouds there, plain as day to me, real big across that.
Yep.
Now, since we're trying to be a family-friendly show, you might let the kids know this is about the gender, right? But nonetheless, it's the word sex right there across the globe. You can see it on the left side there, on the left image. And I just added the red line to kind of fill in to show you. Thank you. Looks like it, but that's not the only time. It would be almost coincidental if this were the only one, but we'll see here soon in another couple slides. And
that's a heck of a coincidence, because that cloud formation covers thousands of miles.
Right.
So that's quite a coincidence.
Reminds me of Disney. What is it in the movie Lion King?
Yes.
Over 100 times that word is hidden somewhere in the clouds or in the dust or the leaves, whatever they could. It was just subliminal messaging almost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Very occultic, very occult behavior. But If you'd read this one, Sean. This was 2012.
Yeah, the NASA Blue Marble image of the Earth taken from the VIIRS instrument aboard NASA's most recently launched Earth observing satellite, Suomi NPP. This composite image uses a number of swaths of the Earth's surface taken on January 4th, 2012.
So there it is, nasa.gov. Obviously, it's not now at this point in time the most recently launched Earth observing satellite, but in 2012 it was. And there they are again, admitting it's a composite image and not actually a photograph at all, which would make sense given the enormous size of the North American continent, taking
That's
up the
huge,
entire.
man.
This is planet North America, just about, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's crazy because
So-
if you go ahead.
Okay, so how far out was VIIRS supposed to be in their fictional story?
I don't know for certain. I'm sorry.
You remember how they told us some satellites are like 1 million miles in geosynchronous orbit around the Earth?
There's one,
Right.
the Voyager, they
A
said it was like
million miles.
3.7 billion. Yeah.
What, so like if the diameter of the Earth is 4,000 miles, what do they say it is? 4,000 miles?
No, the circumference they say is 24,901.
24.
The diameter.
Diameter, I'm not positive off the top of my
So
head.
that's left to right of this marble that we're looking at.
Gotcha. Diameter of Earth,
They say that is, if that no, the
7,917.
diameter is half, right? No, that's the
Seven-
radius.
Yeah, just about 8,000 miles diameter.
So 1 million miles versus 8,000 miles, and they still can't get far enough away to take a picture of the entire Earth. They got to get large swaths and push them together. Like it's just
Exactly.
nonsense.
Because to remind the viewer, if you weren't aware, as we understand it, nobody can get high enough to take a photograph of the entire Earth altogether. There's a barrier. There's a certain level where I would propose you can't even have an atmosphere thick enough to be able to create thrust and lift and combustion to be able to get high enough to where they can't even reach the firmament of heaven. But they couldn't get out of it if they tried, so they can't see the entire Earth in one frame. It's not possible. Same reason we can't give you a whole picture of a geocentric planar stationary Earth.
Right. Yeah.
But especially it's funny when you compare the other images that they've given over the years and the sizes of the North American continent just never, they can't get it together. They can't come together and say, let's decide on a standard uniform appearance of the continents on this ball. But
And I would love to hear their excuses. I can just hear it now. They probably have something to say about focal length or something. That's not how a focal length works.
no.
Okay. So no, this is just more sloppy graphics. That's all it is.
Thank you. So as somebody that's experienced and professional photographer, when we hear these arguments of that's just different angles, it's just different cameras at different times.
That's not how it works. No.
The continent would not, because the ball is when you scale the balls to the same size next to each other like this,
right?
The continent should be proportionately congruent of some sort.
Yep.
They're not at all.
Yep.
So there's that one. Boom, roasted. We got a European, a European Space Agency, right? We're going to show you some of these other guys from across the world and their alleged space agencies. And keep in mind, these guys are all part of the United Nations. They all have signed the treaty for Antarctica. They're all working together in some capacity. But I'll read this. Unlike most satellite images of Earth, this one was not assembled from multiple swath scans or digitally projected onto a globe model. It's the full disk of our planet captured as a single enormous 121 megapixel image acquired by Russia's Electro-L weather forecasting satellite. So they're claiming that this is a genuine photograph, is what they want to say about this one. Good old Russia, right?
Finally.
I didn't know that Saudi Arabia had so much green sand.
I know.
Really, man. Good grief. It's a giant oasis.
The Persian Gulf is like the Garden of Eden. Look at how green it is.
But I mean, if you look at the details of the specs, they say they're using an interferometer of some sort to be able to present the image, and then it turns the vegetation to this rust color you're seeing. Has nothing to do with an animator or a cartoon.
So wait, it turns the sand green and it turns the green brown.
That's what they're saying here. But I noticed something funny about this, and here's another example of what you were saying earlier, Michael, of how NASA or the government agencies at play here will release an image and they'll have some mistakes, or they'll have some things that you can pick apart about it, but then they'll go back and clean it up. Well, this is another one of those examples. Whereas if you were to search this, it took me a minute to find this image because they had cleaned it up in recent times for other releases. But like on certain websites, they were promoting this image and that whole European Space Agency mission that they're doing with this satellite. These images that they've used have this hand tool, and wouldn't you say that's exactly a tool specific to Photoshop? Is it not?
Yes, it is. But here's the funny part: the only way that they could have that tool in there is if they took a screenshot of the image.
Right,
which is totally funny.
Therefore, you couldn't change the levels and see all the masking layers, right? Just take a screenshot.
Yep.
That's why they can say it's one actual photo that they made from composite.
There it is. That's how they get around the lie. Half truths.
They lawyered it. Oh, it's a real photo. Photo.
We took a photo of the photo that we made.
Yes, right.
That's basically what
genuine.
Yeah.
Which is what they did with the moon landing. Remember, they would not let the broadcasters have an actual feed from their computer system. The broadcasters had to actually shoot the moon landing on NASA monitors.
Really? Okay. That's why it looked so grainy, so hazy.
That's why it looked so grainy. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Good catch. Well, so that one isn't the only one that is claimed to be a authentic, genuine photograph. Whereas, as we've shown, NASA themselves admit that a lot of them are composite images created in image editing softwares of sorts. But these 3 satellites take high resolution images of the full disk of the Earth all day, every day. They're saying, if you could move our pictures one more time back, if you could, because on the left here, the Himawari 8 from Japan, they actually work hand in hand with the NOAA, I believe it is. It's a facet of NASA. They say that one takes a satellite photograph every 10 minutes. Whereas the GOES 16 takes one every 15 minutes. And then the Discover, NASA's satellite, takes one every hour. And
you can see in the Discover image, you can actually see the word SEX upside down.
You can. We're going to get to that one here momentarily too. Yeah, as I said earlier, it wasn't the only one. But yeah, if the Discover kind of matched the Himawari and the GOES, I could understand that. But once again, they'll tell you different cameras, different lighting, different exposures, different whatnot.
Yep.
But let's just pick one of them and try to debunk it, because I think we have a friend named Paul on the plane who has a video that he has thoroughly debunked this idea that these are genuine real-time photographs being taken in a single frame shot, as they're claiming here. So could you play that clip, my friend?
Yeah. So many clouds. This Earth is nothing but clouds.
A lot of times you can barely see any land in some of them. It's like they're intentionally trying to keep it vague.
Yep. How convenient.
Today we're going to focus on the Himawari geostationary satellite, which we're told is something like a mind-boggling 22,000 miles away from the Earth, sending us a real picture every 10 minutes. So why are we picking on the Himawari today? Well, defenders of the heliocentric model love to point to the quote-unquote almost real-time images from the Himawari as proof of a globular Earth, since it allegedly gives us a picture every 10 minutes, and the weather data seems to be, pretty current. Well, unfortunately for the ballers, we're going to debunk that completely here, simply in the next 5 minutes, and show you how they fake it all. Let's cut right to the smoking gun to start. Here is the website anyone can go to and see this all for themselves. On a side note, the Himawari is operated by the Japanese Meteorological Space Agency and brought to us by the NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's GOES geostationary satellite server. So when you're at the FTP site, click here for the site description. So when you do, a text file comes up, and you can see right here, they tell you that all of the images in the archive use the underlying colored land images from the NASA Blue Marble dataset. Yep. So the Himawari is actually totally debunked right there. These aren't real pictures coming from a satellite in a geostationary orbit above the Earth, getting snapped every 10 minutes and being beamed down for us to all ooh and ah over. They take the Blue Marble data set, which I'm sure you remember. They admitted years ago was a flat strip data pieced together by an artist named Rob Simon in Photoshop. And then to just briefly show you how they generate a picture every 10 minutes with what appears to be accurate and current weather, this is basically what they do. Number one, they have already created and stored transparent images of the weather over the oceans using climate simulation software, which they openly admit right here that they've done climate simulations up to the year 2095. But it's actually the year 2100 on this FTP server folder, and here's one of the images. And following some of the other images that you can find where the land masses are transparent, and they use all this simulation software to come up with the weather over the oceans. You know, since our weather data comes from our ground-based Doppler radar, and it's impossible to use ground-based systems to cover the entire vast oceans, so that's where the weather over the oceans comes from, their software simulations. Number two, now for the weather over the land, the NOAA has supercomputers that take data coming in from all over the world, Doppler radar feeds, and crunch it all together and combine it with the weather simulation data over the oceans, so they come up with a complete composite weather quote-unquote map, which is then wrapped around a ball in their 3D modeling software programs, just like we've shown countless times in our previous episodes with the Earth and the planets, etc. So, then what we get are composite images like this that are created in the 3D modeling software, the current Doppler weather data over land and the simulated weather over the oceans, and it looks like this. So this particular image is on the FTP server and is date and time stamped with October 11th, 2017 at 11:05 a.m. I just chose one randomly. Notice the image shows you the weather for the whole ball and not just part of the ball that is lit by the sun at this particular time. No Terminator line or anything like that, right? Okay, now here's the kicker. Go to the other file folder, which is the images that we get to see and are told are real pictures from space. But what they've simply done is taken the weather map picture of the whole ball they created and they superimpose it over the blue marble data set, just like they said they did. So what you can see here is the final version of what we're spoon-fed and told is a picture taken by the Himawari from space, like, 10 minutes ago. This is the image from the same date and time, October 11th, 2017 at 11:05 a.m. And you can see that the weather is exactly the same. Watch it closely. There's your weather map comprised of simulated and Doppler radar being used to complete a composite image. They do this with the Discover satellite too, the Epic camera from 1 million miles away, they tell us. Ridiculous. Okay. Now, also notice the final image has a Terminator line added in to try to make it look like a real picture from space, which drives a nail in the coffin of the Himawari because the weather data shows it over the whole ball completely. But they have to add a Terminator line to show the Earth only partially lit by the sun based on the time of day that the photo is allegedly taken. So if this is a real picture, how did they know where to put the clouds and weather on the part of the globe with no sunlight? It's completely dark there. It's all right here, guys. They are faking space. Hey, we all fell for it for a long time with their Doppler radar and weather simulation software building a current weather picture and wrapping it around a ball in 3D software and pasting it onto a black background like they do with all the others, adding a Terminator line and calling it a real picture from space. Himawari debunked once and for all. This has been Paul on the Plane. Thanks for watching.
Debunked. Uncommon ground style with the help of Mr. Paul on the Plane. We appreciate you over there. Y'all check out Paul on the Plane. Got a great YouTube channel with lots of content like that. And so that was a good one, perfect for tonight's episode because, yeah, they use these lawyerese and these half-truths to portray these images as if they're real-time photographs, still shots of one-offs of single frame images that, as you can see from that video, that they're just not. They're composite images again.
Right.
Used from the same blue marble data set. So there's that one. You mentioned this one a little bit earlier, but it's named after the Earth polychromatic imaging camera, EPIC. And Paul just mentioned this one too, that they say is 1 million miles away, this so-called satellite. And this image of our home was our home world, so-called, was snapped from NASA's Deep Space Climate Observatory satellite from about 1 million miles away on July 6, 2015. It showcases a fully sunlit globe that is actually a combination of different photos stitched together, right off of NASA's website as well. So what if we flip this upside down and take a look at it, though? So it's flipped now. And as we noticed a certain word printed in the clouds earlier, but they've added another set of numbers even to this one. If you'll go back and forth a couple times for us, brother. How about that? Y'all see that clear as day? Not quite as big as the other one that we showed that word printed over, but now you got the 3 6s at the bottom.
Yeah.
So occult and subliminal, but right there in your face at the same time.
Yep.
How about that? Interesting.
I mean, that's the whole point. Heliocentrism is a cult.
It is
pure and simple. It has all the earmarks of a cult.
Now, for everyone listening out there, we've said this. I've said this many times on the show, similar to what Michael just said, and I just want you guys to understand that if you're watching this and we've all been taught the globular heliocentric model growing up, and if you're just now coming to this information and you're hearing us tell you that the scriptures and the Creator told you He created something completely different, and it's more like a big house with multiple floors to that house. It's not a ball in an ever expanding vacuum of space. And so if you're just hearing that for the first time, we're not saying that you're in a cult, but we're saying that we were all taught a cult ideology and basically theology, because with this symbols, with the fictitious world they've created for their system of creation, is the theology of no God, you're going to die a heat death from your sun going supernova, you're a meaningless meat bag with no moral consequences. The evolutionary model, the Darwinian model, like it's all pushed together. It's a cult ideas that is the antithesis of what Scripture says. We're not saying that you're a cult member, but we were all taught cult ideology and religious beliefs. So we're breaking out of that and trying to show you the truth, because the liars are not very good at covering their tracks.
Right. Helios, the word that they've incorporated into heliocentric, right, is Helios is a sun god, a solar deity, so called. And fun fact about the word Himawari that was used for the Japanese satellite that we just looked at the Apollo and the plane video. Himawari is Japanese for sunflower. So for whatever that's worth, they got to put the sun in there somehow, some way, right? Well, that was a perfect segue, Sean, because you said something about the insignificance that they want to portray us with, right? And so here's a shot from 1990 that I think Carl Sagan helped to popularize in one of his publications at the time. And pale blue dot is what they called it. Would you read this, one of you? Michael?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the image.
It's hard to see.
Right. There's a little speck.
Right. That's where we live. Pale blue dot is a famous photograph of planet Earth taken on February 14th, 1990 by the Voyager 1 space probe from a record distance of about 3.7 billion miles away. That's hilarious.
Give me that Valentine's Day gift.
Billion. Yep, there it was.
That's hilarious.
And could you imagine how easy it would be to just like have a dark room, crack a window a little bit, and you got some rays of sunlight coming through, and then all you got to do was with the negative or with the photo just etch, like scratch a little dot out.
Sure.
So you got this,
sure. That's
little speck.
And the whole thing of, oh wow, we're so awesome, we can see billions of miles away. That's ridiculous. I can't read a license plate 3 houses down from me. Okay. I mean, even with the strongest, I mean, we flat earthers use the most powerful camera built. I mean, it literally is the most powerful camera built. There's no other camera like the P1000 or the P900 or the P950. The P cameras have the longest lenses in the industry. Check it out. And yet we still can't see. Like, I live in Akron, I can't see all the way to California. It's not going to work. There's limits because of focal length, because of perspective. There is no way they can see billions of miles. As a matter of fact, they even claim we can not only see billions of miles, because we can see billions of miles away, we can literally see back in time.
Yeah, right.
Okay, because the light coming toward you is old by the time it gets there. So you're seeing that light source as it existed millions of years ago. It's ridiculous.
That's what they claim. It's Looney, isn't it? It's Looney Tunes.
It is.
And another thing is, once again, you got this speck of white light that's representative of the so-called Earth, yet no stars, no other planets, no galaxies, none of the James Webb telescope, thousands of other galactic imagery going on in the foreground or the background, just the one speck of light that's supposed to be the Earth. And Carl Sagan had a quote about this too that I thought was interesting and paralleled what you were saying a moment ago, Sean. What's that quote on the next slide? Would you read it, Sean?
I thought that's us. A motive. No, hang on. Let me read it in his voice. I thought that's us, a mote of dust in a sunbeam, and it spoke to me, and it underscored the tininess, the comparative insignificance of our world and ourselves. Please buy my book. So, yeah, man, this is crazy. Like someone said in the live stream, in the chat, you can't see stars either. It's just nonsense. Like, there's so many ways to fake this, but again, Carl Sagan was in this most popular in the early 70s, right? Well, mid 70s.
Yeah.
People back then, the average person didn't have access to any type of high telephotic or digital zoom lenses of any kind on their cameras, much less amateur astronomers. Was not a very popular thing. And buying a telescope money was a little bit different back in the 70s. So it wasn't as accessible to look into the sky with advanced technology as it is today for the average person. So therefore, images like these are sold to the public without anyone questioning anything.
Yep.
That's right. And what he underscores here, the tininess, the comparative insignificance of our world and ourselves, is really what a central core theme behind their message that they want you to believe, is that we're on an insignificant speck floating in infinite expanding universe that's amongst infinite potential for other life forms that are zooming through the darkness of space on the road to nowhere, and eventually will blow up during a supernova sun. Things like that. But on the next slide, it's just more cartoons of what they want you to believe that you're not only on this cartoon ball, but that you're amongst unlimited potential for other cartoon balls in a cartoon galaxy. And then we can kind of speed through some of this for sake of time.
You guys ever, Michael, the Great Attractor? Is that they call this the Great Attractor, the big bright center of the galaxy?
Yes.
But we can't see it, by the way.
No. So how'd they get that picture anyway? They paid someone like me. That's what they did.
It's from that Star Trek movie. Remember where they met V'ger?
Yes, V'ger. I love that movie. It was great.
It's just the Voyager 300 years from now.
Yep.
That's what's up. So here recently, this was a very recent thing that was making its way across all the headlines of many news and outlets and tabloids of whatnot, because the James Webb Telescope put out some images, right? And this is just one of the worst deep space photographs I think that they've ever tried to produce, where it's just the bright highlights of the lens flares or whatever we got going on there. Isn't that interesting that it's only on select galaxies or whatever the case that produce this massive lens flare, but it's the same exact cookie cutter copy paste lens flare.
It's the same one, man. I mean, look at that. It's the same one. That's
many of the other little images in the background of these so-called galaxies are just copy paste, looking exactly the same. Doesn't really take much time to zoom in and notice that kind of thing. And on the next slide, the fun facts is that it's the metadata, they call it, the photo forensics, the files of the original image files. You can run those through data analyzers that will then give you the data behind the image. And lo and behold, Adobe Photoshop is the writer name for the source of this image in the photo forensics.
But you can't run data through Photoshop and generate an automatic image. That's not how Photoshop works.
Agreed.
So I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Well, that would mean to me that it was just simply created from scratch in Photoshop.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
As with many of their images from so-called deep space. I like this little Wired tabloid headline: how NASA visualizes stunning worlds without really seeing them. How do you visualize something without seeing it? You got to just make it up.
You just contradicted yourself. You visualize nothing. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. What else did it say there?
I don't know if this is right or not, but I just looked up James Webb. Like, I'm sure it's there, some dude that got attributed to it, whether it's the guy who gave the grant or actually, didn't we all give the grant?
Right. Yeah.
So shouldn't we all be on the name of this? But anyway, I don't know how they got the name James Webb, but if you look up the meaning of the names James and Webb, it could easily be one who weaves a supplanted idea.
How about that? Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wow.
In the tagline or the byline underneath Wired's headline there, it does say, if you can't really make it out, but it says, making space seem real and beautiful isn't just marketing, it's good for science too. mainstream scientism, the religion of just believing what they say because they're in the authority to say so, not actual science whatsoever.
Wow.
But they make it seem real and beautiful, don't they?
Oh, what kind of image is this? Is this
because they don't just want you to believe that you're on a cartoon ball. They don't just want you to believe that there's infinite other cartoon balls in your galaxy and that there's infinite galaxies out there. On top of that, they also, if they can get you to believe all that, they'd love to sell you the idea of panspermia, that you're in a multiverse of universes and that these were created or something by ancient aliens, right?
Wow.
This is the
no, it was created by Marvel.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Those giants. What do they call it in that one movie, Sean? The giants that created the planets and the galaxies and whatnot.
The Celestials?
Yeah,
the Celestials. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, remember, like we talked about an episode in season 1, when we did our alien invasion episode, the word cosmos is from the Greek, which means the realm of Satan and his unclean spirits.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So like,
sure does.
It's crazy. Like this is their fairy tale. This is their dream, you know?
Yep.
The God of this world. That's right. And he'd love to make you believe that this world is not what the Father and the creator of this world said that he made. And so it's never a globe believing ball earther that's going to put all these pictures together side by side, but it's only ever somebody that agrees with the biblical creation model or is a quote unquote flat earther that will combine these images into a single slide so you can see them all next to each other and just get a good laugh for how radically different they are, how the proportions and sizes of the different images and the continents are radically different oftentimes. The Photoshop clouds, the copy and paste work. I don't know how you could be watching this and not, if you weren't understanding that these were all cartoons and Photoshopped composite images, that I don't know how you couldn't notice that, especially once they admit it multiple times now.
My thing is this. Okay, I grant you this. The different color schemes of each image. Okay, you can get that with different types of editing, even different type of shooting and different type of sensor, different type of film. You can get different color renditions. Okay, I get it. But proportions, no, you cannot. The continents are going to be the same in relation to each other every single time. Okay. So no, that it doesn't work that way.
Right. Agreed. Yeah.
Speaking of proportion.
That's right. Yep. They want you to believe that you're on that cartoon ball and these galaxies, universes, and all this. And they also want you to believe that the Earth is surrounded by, as we talked about in, I think, episode 11 last year, we did an episode called Satellites and Satelloons, which is great if you haven't seen it yet, because they want us to believe that the Earth is surrounded by not only 6,000 plus satellites, but there's also space debris. Right, there's pieces of the broken satellites and the retired satellites out there floating around, and then there's
which never fall to Earth.
Yeah,
geosynchronous, and that's how they're at that right limit to keep them attracted to the Earth with no propulsion. But once they break, they never fall.
But another thing to notice is in all of these images that have been presented to us from the space agencies of a full shot of the Earth, supposedly, you never see a single one of these. You never see any kind of cloud of metal debris. You never, from even the images given to us from the International Space Station, they don't even present a single other satellite floating around them or below them. There's never another satellite, even though they say there's over 6,000. I think.
Remember the movie Gravity?
Yeah.
Okay. That should happen to the International Space Station constantly.
It should.
Okay. The fact that no one has died is ridiculous. I mean, the International.
Well, hey, now, don't you remember in 2018 they had a hole?
He put his thumb in it.
He put his thumb in it. Yeah, that was a base insult to every person who paid for that fantasy. Okay, because there's so many ways he should have died horribly just by sticking his thumb in there. I mean, even before the thumb. I mean,
they wouldn't have discovered it. Is the thing. They would have been sucked out of it like a straw.
Right. Exactly.
While they slept, like the moment it happened. You know what I mean?
Yep. They would have either been sucked out of that little hole, which would turn into a big hole, or they would have died from decompression, which is a horrible way to go.
And that's actually there's compressed tanks that they have, high sophisticated technological tanks, and that's one of the ways that other tanks destroy those pressurized tanks is they shoot an actual metal rod through them, which bursts that compression on the inside, and the occupants of said tank then liquefy and come out the hole on the other side.
Wow.
So like this is something we literally observed on the ground between warfare in the modern time, and we have astronauts up there being like, hey, Don, is that a hole over there? Yeah, just a minute, see what happens. Like, this is just it is insulting. You're right.
We're surrounded by a -16 torr vacuum that they say it is outside of that spacecraft. Yeah, we'll get more into in a future episode the space stations, but as I said, we've covered satellites before. We've shown you how if you were to Google images of satellites from space, doesn't take a trained eye to see that a lot of them aren't even as good as like PlayStation 2 graphics, right? Maybe even PlayStation 1. We're talking about cartoons left and right. It's Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
There's more.
There's more cartoons. Yeah. I wish we could do a whole episode just on covering the different rocket launches and the different missions where they'll be covering some live coverage of the launch. And within seconds sometimes of that launch, they immediately cut to animation. Sometimes they'll tell you it's one. Sometimes they like in the one in the middle on the left side, that was one where they didn't even really outright say that it was an animation, but a trained eye can tell that's computer generated imagery. And they can't just use one of those thousands of satellites that are out in the surrounding space to then show you a video of that rocket launching to space, because as we covered in one of our episodes of It's Not Rocket Science, they're not actually going to space. Space isn't even real to begin with. They just launch them into the ocean.
Doesn't exist.
Right.
Yep.
So what do you guys think
about that? That parabolic arch.
Right.
What do you guys think about these rocket launches? You see and compare the imagery here of some are clearly early animated images, and they'll probably tell you that, like, oh, to show you, since we don't have a camera to show you how it's reached over 90,000 feet, here's an animation we've put together to show you what stage it's at now. But what if they're showing the animated mixing with what they call real, when really they show you such clear, obvious bad animation from 1990. So then when they show you what they claim is real with modern PS5 graphics, you think it's actually real. Kind of like all the SpaceX launches and reentry landings.
Right.
Like you think that, oh, that looks so real because I just saw something that's so fake looking. You know what I mean? But all the while, like all of it's fake.
Yep.
That's right. Yep. That's a good contrast that they'll set up. It's a good catch that you said there, because they'll definitely try to pass some of it off as if it's not animation when it clearly is. Mars, we'll do an episode in the future. I hope to get to it soon on the Mars missions, because those are infamous for regularly scheduled programming of animated images of the so-called rovers and the little helicopters when there's not enough atmosphere allegedly to be able to fly a helicopter. All kinds of silliness, but it's cartoons every time.
I will admit, though, the Mars animations are the best. They're the most entertaining.
Yeah, they go overboard for that. They put a little more of the budget into those.
I will give them that. Yeah, they're good.
And there is some footage where they'll use rovers that it's live, or it's real, live footage of a rover rolling around on the ground, and they'll just put a nice red tint over it. We'll get into all of that on Devon Island and different things in the future.
Easy to do.
Mars episode.
Easy to do.
But so the cartoon balls, the cartoon galaxies, cartoon universe, the cartoon rockets, cartoon satellites, cartoon space debris, cartoon it's all been cartoons, including the different worlds that they want you to believe that they've found and discovered, right? The TRAPPIST-1 system was one that I remember hearing about. But yeah, NASA will tell you outright that they have animators to do the job of visualizing these different places. And if you would play that clip, my brother, we'll see what they have to say.
In the meantime, they are images that inspire, educate, and sometimes just make us say, wow. Over the years, NASA has given us spectacular photos and renderings that reveal a colorful and mysterious universe.
No doubt. And now Chris Martinez is introducing us to two of the artists behind some of the most iconic space art in the galaxy.
In a small, bright office, working side by side.
Let's see.
Robert Hurt and Tim Pyle bring the universe to life.
What we're doing does have real science underlying it.
Robert is an astrophysicist turned artist. Tim, once a Hollywood animator, is now a planet illustrator. Together, they produce some of NASA's most popular images, from renderings of how planets light years away could look, to actual photos of stars and galaxies captured by NASA's powerful telescopes.
And this is sort of how it comes to me. And then
Many of those images have a dark, grainy start, but color and light reveal an astonishing glimpse of how the deepest regions of space might appear to the human eye.
What I'm trying to do is show people sort of the broader colors that the universe has to offer.
It's a delicate blend of imagination and data. The artists meet with NASA scientists over many drafts to ensure a planet or galaxy's look lines up with the research to make each one as accurate as possible.
I love the challenge. It's kind of like a puzzle to me of trying to create something that looks really cool within the restrictions that were given by the scientists.
It can take days, even weeks, to produce just a single image. The dazzling final results, enough to keep us all dreaming of the final frontier for years to come.
I'm a visualization scientist. I basically try to come up with ways of explaining complex science stories through the visuals, developing artwork and illustrations that actually can help explain the science story to people.
For decades, popular culture and shows like Star Trek inspired a generation of scientists by envisioning what space might look like. But wait, what does space actually look like? Heart nebulas, celestial collisions, a bird's eye view of the Milky Way, astronomers are charting the outer reaches of the cosmos and bringing back jaw-dropping images from telescopes like Hubble and its infrared cousin Spitzer. If you look down at the bottom of that Milky Way image, you'll see these two words: artist concept. This sweeping image of the Orion Nebula actually looks like this. And the TRAPPIST-1 star system, the latest discovery of 7 potentially habitable exoplanets that made national headlines, it's really only a box of gray and white pixels. You see, space art is part of NASA, and it has been since before we went to the moon. Most space imagery begins with data. Very, very complex data. And transforming these numbers and graphs into an image that captures the public's imagination requires a delicate balance between science and art. And that is where Robert comes in. As an astronomer and artist, Robert isn't editing images so much as he's making an artistic hypothesis grounded in facts, so we can visualize what's really happening up there. And for objects we haven't even seen yet, like TRAPPIST-1, the artist rendition is a meticulous process.
Once a result shows up, the first thing I'll do is get a copy of the paper and look over it. I just want to understand what is actually being presented as peer-reviewed science. Then usually the next step is to contact the scientists involved in research directly and discuss with them how we might go about illustrating their result. The first day I saw the data plot of the light curve from the TRAPPIST-1 star, my jaw dropped because it was just a forest of deep dips in the light curve, and we knew there was a whole flurry of activity.
This data doesn't look like much to the untrained eye, but the depth of the dip reveals the size of the planet. And by studying tiny blips of light as the planets pass the star, otherwise known as the transit method, astronomers can tell that the exoplanets orbit close to their star. All of this information is critical so Robert can paint the right picture.
You can actually figure out how big the planet is, what its surface temperatures would be because of that proximity. This is a really tight, close-in solar system. And so that became an exciting angle that we wanted to take into the graphics as well. This is nothing like our own solar system.
To tell a big story like TRAPPIST-1, Robert takes the scientific limitations seriously because the wrong color could be very misleading.
Rendering an exoplanet with bright green continents would be kind of crossing a line for us. We don't want to say, hey, we found life on this planet, and showing green really would communicate that. It's enough to show some evidence of water. In fact, a lot of times we've made special efforts to make the water not look super appealing, not like this tropical deep blue appearance, because you would think that complete accuracy would be the goal when you're doing astronomical illustrations, but it isn't always the case. The primary goal is communication and understanding.
Communicating space discoveries with art has a long and storied history. One of the fathers of modern space art was the famed Chesley Bonestell, a designer and illustrator. In the 1950s, he created an image of Saturn's moon Titan before Neil Armstrong had ever taken his first steps on the lunar surface. Carl Sagan once famously said of Chesley, "I didn't know what other worlds looked like until I saw Bonestell's paintings." His work was so widely acclaimed that his illustrations accompanied articles written by German rocket scientist Wernher von Braun, which ultimately inspired the American space program.
Many of the things that seem impossible now will become realities tomorrow.
Having a visual response to technical triumphs was something NASA latched onto early on. For over 50 years, NASA worked closely with artists and creative leaders like Walt Disney and Norman Rockwell to help shape the stories of spaceflight. It's the same legacy today, just with more advanced scientific understanding and better tools to imagine what far-off worlds might look like if we could visit them.
We want to take a lot of care to make sure we don't oversell the part of the story that isn't actually the story. There are people who just look and think, oh, NASA's photographed a planet, and they don't understand that actually that was a piece of art. On the other hand, if we don't do that and we don't put a piece of compelling artwork, then people may never even look at the story anyway. We're putting as much science as we can of where we know today. And I like to think that in 50 years, when people come back and look at, say, the various pictures of exoplanets after maybe we actually finally know what they look like, they might wink and smile to each other like, oh, that's so funny. They thought there was water on that one. But also appreciate that this is kind of a historical record of how our understanding of these planets has changed over time.
Turns out 50 years later was an overestimate. So much of what we thought we knew about TRAPPIST-1 just changed. Which means Robert had to go back to the drawing board and quickly redo the artwork for these exoplanets. Robert described the changes during a Facebook Live event, and for him, density was a game changer.
For astronomers, we literally know of thousands of exoplanets, but these are the only 7 that we have precise measurements of the mass, and from that, the density. And density, for astronomers, is incredibly important because that's the first step to deciding what they're actually made of.
Knowing the densities changed our understanding of what the TRAPPIST-1 planets looked like. For instance, back in 2017, scientists thought planet D was rocky, but it turns out it has the lowest density of the 7, and it's actually a water world. And for planet E, Robert and his team thought it was a watery planet, but it's actually super rocky and has the same density as Earth, meaning planet E is the most Earth-like planet we know yet. We are a long way from sending a spacecraft to TRAPPIST-1, without warp drive, of course, so for now, the artwork will continue to stand as our best guess.
For now, the artwork will continue to stand as our best guess. Fascinating comment in the comments here. Art and artists have always been promoted and glorified by the occult because it helps tell their story to indoctrinate. It's profound. Oh, that was you, Sean. You said that.
Yeah. It's true, though. I mean, it's really true. It's amazing. Like, if you look at all throughout history, especially from India, which I've tried to put the case forward, that this whole narrative comes from the theology of ancient Hinduism, of ancient India. It's actually before Hinduism was around. It was Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu, the OGs from the Tower of Babel days. In that they had a very similar concept of a multiverse with a Milky Way and a multiple gods and reincarnation, which is the whole evolutionary heliocentric stellar model that we have today of explosion with their own version of a Big Bang and rebirth and dying, and everything that is told with slightly different language today. All of it had to be visualized so that people could believe what they were describing. And so this is why the artists were so venerated, glorified, commissioned, catered to, you know what I'm saying, by the kings, the rulers, the princes, because it was the only, just like in the same vein in our culture today, look how the intimate connection between the government and Hollywood.
So very true. Yep. And they pointed out a good point is that NASA for over 50 years, they said, worked with artists like Walt Disney and the Disney Corporation. And earlier we heard that, the same program that one visualizer used is the same program Pixar uses to make their movies. And so, right. Disney hand in hand has been a part of the occult illustrators for the occult theology, for sure. Some other highlights from that video, noteworthy mentions, is that they showed finally some of the data that they use to translate into these pictures. What I found interesting is they'll say, oh, these little dots on this graph represent the dips in the light, basically implying that when the so-called planet goes behind its star, then the dip in the light causes you to realize, oh, that was the length of its orbit and revolution around their star. But then, so if there's a dip in the light, what about the light from the star? That doesn't, that's not a problem for trying to measure that light.
What's more is I want to make sure that guy who claims the dip in the light is actual, has anything to do with a planet or its rotation around the sun. What if it's just one of those 30,000 satellites that got in the way, just crossed its path?
I'd like to, you know what? I am under the impression that that data is contrived anyway.
Yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally made up, and there's someone that we don't know. Of course, they'll never tell you who that person is or persons. They make up this data based on the narrative that the scientist or the powers that be create. They give it to the artist, and they have a language. They have a code, and this data is that code, and they follow that code. And within the constraint of that language, they create all of these images.
So who's the guy that creates the image or the data points?
Right.
That then they take to the translating visual artists and illustrators. I want to know who those people are and where how they create these data points. They're just back there sneezing on film.
Might as well be, right?
Yeah,
might as well be. But sometimes, Sean, there's images that look like, you know, they'll give us real-time, real-world footage that you can tell is taken from a camera, but it looks like that there's a curvature on these high-altitude footages that they'll send us. Much like if a skydiver or a high-altitude balloon goes up, sometimes you get this footage that appears to have real curvature on it, but a closer inspection, closer look can reveal otherwise. I think this would be a good one for you, Michael. Would you read this?
The term fisheye was coined in 1906 by American physicist and inventor Robert W. Wood, based on how a fish would see an ultra-wide hemispherical view from beneath the water. Their first practical use during the 1920s was in meteorology to study cloud formation, giving them the name whole sky lenses. Mass-produced fisheye lenses for photography first appeared in the early 1960s and are generally used for their unique distorted appearance.
Okay, so a fisheye lens is a specific lens that can be fitted to a camera. And they were originally used in the 1920s, they're saying, and then they became mass produced later in the 1960s. The more popular they became to use, and they were used for meteorology originally to look up. But somewhere along the line, somebody figured out that you could point that lens at the Earth, and it would force a distortion on the horizon, right?
The interesting thing about fisheye lenses, and basically they're simply extreme wide angle lenses.
Right.
To give a little background context, lenses are based on a 35 millimeter format, and a 50 millimeter lens is based on the proportion created by the human eye, how the human eye sees. So anything under 50 millimeter is considered wide angle. Anything above 50 millimeter is considered telephoto. Okay. So fisheye is really extreme. It's like from 18 millimeter to 5 millimeter. Okay. So that's really wide. Now, the interesting thing about fisheye is that when you tilt, if you keep the fisheye perpendicular to the film plane, or if you don't tilt the camera, just keep it nice and straight, the image, it has no distortion whatsoever. But if you tilt it up, the image will curve. Like
if you tilt it up, it becomes convex, and until
it becomes convex. Right. And then the other direction is inverse.
Yeah.
So if you notice, Felix Bonhoeffer or whatever his name was,
Baumgartner, yeah.
Thank you. That made that jump. When the camera on his capsule, or when the camera on him, every time it moved, the Earth went curve one direction, curve the other direction. It was straight, just one. You know, it was like the Great Morphing Earth, and that's because that's how fisheye lenses work.
It is right. And
you know, you can actually simulate the effect of a fisheye lens with your own eyes if you squeeze them at the sides. In fact, we have an example from this famous guy showing us how to do it.
The good old Aleister Crowley, huh?
Yeah.
Not good at all.
No.
No.
And you have to wear the occultic hat attributed in Ra.
And you have to sign your name with a phallus in the A. You ever
That's
seen
right.
his
Right.
signature?
Yeah.
They love the innuendos. Yes, sir. So there's that, and if you were to look at, that little cartoon was funny. It's the globe and the fisheye lens have been married, BFFs since at least the 1960s, probably.
Yeah.
As we see, they've that lens has been available since the 20s, as we saw at the beginning of the episode, the 1946, 1948 V2 rocket footage. As I pointed out, that it does appear that it wasn't perfectly flat. Well, it makes perfect sense if they just used a wide angle lens to produce a little bit of curvature that they needed to paste together images to produce an effect of a curvature of the Earth. But the Mythbusters did an episode. What was it? The Fantasy Flights, I think, was the name of the episode. And here at 70,000 feet, they show a nice rounded image of the Earth, of the horizon being really curved. But something interesting is if you look at the same video, when the pilot, Andy, I think was his name there, he's taken off, and they got these GoPros, right? GoPros come stock with a fisheye lens.
Yep.
Most action cameras do, right? Action sports cameras and these
Right.
GoPros and things like them. And so he's got multiple ones of these GoPros in the cockpit there with him. And it's a little, the contrast could be different for us to see better, but I've indicated with the red dotted line to show you the exact same curvature forced at however, maybe less than 100 feet, maybe even 10 feet off the ground here.
Right.
It's the same exact curvature rate in the background as it is at 70,000 feet. If you'll go back one more time, Sean, just to show the people so they can see, same exact angles of curvature.
Wow. And action cameras usually come with software to correct that distortion.
They do. That's actually one of the things GoPro advertises on their website, is that you can reverse the distortion if you want, but it comes stock with the fisheye barrel. Is barrel lens distortion the same terminology?
Yes.
Barrel lens. Yep, I've heard that too. So either way, it's morphing and flexing. And if you go to the next slide, what's this?
Yep, there it is.
So here is a 2022 Ukrainian cockpit happening right now in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Fighter jet from the Ukraine, cockpit cam showing a completely flat horizon behind him.
Probably 60 or 70,000 feet up, huh, in altitude.
Yeah, it's just crazy how, there's no GoPro lens on his Ukrainian cockpit because,
no.
It's just crazy how easy this kind of stuff is of just blatant trickery. I mean, it's like the old stage show magicians who just literally had the right setup of mirrors.
Right.
You know?
Smoke and
Really
mirrors.
simple.
Here's one where it's a high balloon footage. This is they sent up a Nintendo. I think some kids did this at a college. They sent up a Nintendo game. It's Earthbound is the name of the Nintendo game, which I wouldn't know if it weren't for Super Smash Bros. But they got some footage here. If you look at on the top row on the left and the far right, these are really close to the ground, right as the balloon's taken off. Well, in the far left image, you see this really concave, as if, okay, so if this is genuine, unedited, footage without a distortion, then we're left to believe that is Earth like a concave cereal bowl Earth? Is that what we're talking about? But then you get on the far right, you get another image real close to the ground where that curvature is really exaggerated, really close to the ground, as we know we don't observe with our own eyes. But the further it goes up, the more the camera pans up and down, you start to see this flexing, morphing happening. And it's really easy to catch. It's shocking how many globe-believing individuals in these debates will give you videos and send you a link to say, what do you mean? We can see the curvature of the Earth from this footage, but they don't even care to mention, wait, no, that's not real curvature. It can't be because it's flexing and it's morphing as if the Earth were just some globular continuous thing.
Right.
Just like the Matrix. Don't you know it's a prison for your mind? The Earth is what you envision it to be.
Right. Yeah.
Just all sarcasm for the audience there, guys.
Correct. So you mentioned some of the things that we're going to hear from here, including Felix Baumgartner at the Red Bull Stratosphere Edge of Space jump. We're going to look at some of that in this clip, and we're going to say thank you to ODD TV, Matt Purcell over there. Great channel as well, ODD TV. But he's presented some things that I added a couple clips to. Let's show the people.
I want to address the insane amount of people that don't seem to understand how fisheye lenses or wide-angle lenses work. I consistently have people send me links to videos where they believe they are seeing the curvature of the Earth. But what they are actually seeing is a forced curve due to the lens of the camera. These lenses are called fisheye or wide-angle lenses, and they come standard on GoPro and TomTom cameras. In fact, all action cameras come standard with these lenses. The definition of a fisheye lens is an ultra-wide-angle lens that produces strong visual distortion to create a wide, panoramic, or hemispherical image.
When this lens is arranged sort of straight on to the horizon, it doesn't have any weird curvature or distortion. It just looks ultra wide. There might be a little bit of distortion on the edges, but it looks just super wide. Whenever you start to tilt it upwards or downwards, that's where you get the curvature distortion. So if you tilt the lens upwards in relationship to the horizon, it's going to kind of curve up and create a bowl type effect. If you tilt it downward, it's going to create a sphere or a kind of an orb type effect.
Besides Hollywood movies and TV shows, these wide-angle camera lenses are the only reason you'll ever witness curvature. It's the very reason why most people believe they have seen curvature. People send me links to endless amounts of videos shot with GoPros. This skydiving video, for instance. False curve. Here's a video from a balloon that was launched by a high school in South Carolina. Doesn't that seem like a bit much to you? Because at 120,000 plus feet, there is no curvature when you use a normal lens that's not distorted whatsoever. Another go-to video for people looking for curvature is the Felix Baumgartner Red Bull jump from 2012. People really believe that they are seeing a genuine curve here, but it's simply a fisheye lens. Otherwise, New Mexico takes up most of the planet. Wake up, ladies and gentlemen. They say Felix jumped from 126,000 feet, and this is how much curve there is. But again, look at footage from 121,000 feet on a camera without distortion, and you'll see the world how it really is. Curveless.
Felix Baumgartner, he would have been about 2 millimeters above the surface of this globe. That's his edge of space jump. The honesty of it would greatly diminish what I think people thought he was actually doing. And not only that, they made sure to photograph him standing there with a really wide-angle lens, which curves horizontal lines. So in the photo, you see this curvature of Earth's surface, and he said, "Wow, he's in space, look at that." No, he's not. At that height, you don't see the curvature of the Earth if you are 2 millimeters above this beach ball. You just don't. That stuff is flat.
Oh, by the way, you didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you. Do you know how high up above the Earth he was?
No.
So if you take a
63 miles.
Oh, yeah, so right. So take a schoolroom globe, and that's how high above it is he? So he's about 2 millimeters above the surface of a schoolroom globe. So nobody has seen the curvature of the Earth from that height. I just want to make that clear. Okay?
All right, so world-renowned astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson claims that at 332,000 feet, 63 miles in altitude, there's no discernible curvature. Nobody's seen the curvature from that height, he says. At 300,000+ miles, yet they will also have you believe that you can see the Earth's curvature when a ship goes over the horizon from ground level. It's just convoluted nonsense, confusion. And yeah. What do you think, Michael or Sean?
Also, I want to let people know that a fisheye lens isn't the only lens that will give you that type of distortion. A fisheye lens, like I said, is an extreme wide angle. You don't have to have a fisheye lens. You could have a 35 millimeter. Remember, fisheye is like 18 to 5 millimeter. You don't have to have something that extreme. You could have a 35, a 24 millimeter, 20 millimeter. And if you tilt it, you're still gonna get that distortion. Maybe not that extreme, but you will get that distortion.
That's right. It's interesting that the smaller millimeter amount, the wider the angle lens, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the wider the angle lens, the smaller the number.
That's how it works.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yes, sir. Yep. So it's not all cartoons, but they still do a form of animation to distort the footage that they'll show in order to present a deceptive view. Yep. As if there were curvature when there's not. And so that poses the question is, if there were already curvature, why use a camera that adds it when it's not there?
Right. Right.
But that's what fisheye lenses do. And they've almost become standardized. It's as if you're going to send a weather balloon up, then they've already standardized it as you have the idea in your head, or maybe there's even some statutes and regulations somewhere I'm not aware of, but they almost would like you to use a fisheye lens if you're going to send up a camera that high.
And usually people use action cameras because they're small and it doesn't take a lot to use them. Using something like a DSLR is just overkill, and most people will not want to go there because they're far more complicated than an action camera.
Right.
And like you said, action camera comes standard. Now there are some action cameras that actually have 50 millimeter lenses.
Really?
Not many of them, but those are the ones that give you no distortion at all.
I'd imagine they might even be more expensive.
Probably.
Possible. Yeah. Because I know you can get a GoPro for $100, $200, aftermarket $100. Easy.
Yep. I have one. I haven't used it yet, but I have one.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So
Well,
there it is.
So I think the fun question to ask is, of all the narratives they could have come up with to tell you that you live something other than the creation of God, and try to force the narrative through all means of artistry and digital manipulation and visual manipulation to get you to believe this opposite narrative of what God actually described, why choose this narrative?
Why?
That's the question. Why? Why choose this particular narrative of trying to, now we've got to force everyone's mind to think of a ball. Why not some other shape? Why even create a shape out of a narrative? Think about that for a minute. The Bible describes we live in an enclosed area with multiple layers above us, like a big house. We just live on the bottom floor, right?
Yeah.
They could have spun that narrative. By the way, they used to for thousands of years. They used to spin that same narrative and say the gods lived in the sky above, but they still lived below our enclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you know what I'm saying? So like, why move away from that narrative into this narrative? And I think it's because they're trying to prep the deception they want to perpetrate on the whole world with, personally for me, and you know, we can maybe talk about this in greater depth on another episode, but personally for me, the alien invasion there's going to be two alien invasions.
Okay.
The first one is going to be the return of our progenitor, the panspermia father, is going to be literally the revelation of whom believers who understand the scriptures, we would call him Satan. Zeus would call him Zeus. The Egyptians would call him Ra. Right? We understand who his character was, but he'll be parlayed and spun as the original panspermia, the one who seeded life on the earth. And then he will be here for a while. And as I talked about, the elites say that when they want to build living habitations in the sky, and that will become normalized until God starts doing judgment. And then the bad aliens are the ones that show up as far as Apollyon. So to me, like there will be no more narrative. And that's the two stages of deception I foresee happening, because after 42 months of Apollyon, Yeshua returns and there's no more narrative, because then everybody knows that we're in a big room when he opens up. So all that whole narrative is destroyed. So that's the way I expound upon that on my channel on Kingdom of Context and Investigating Babylon series, and I'll be expounding on it further in November in my 42 series. And so that's why I think that they chose this particular narrative. as
Yeah.
opposed to any other narrative they could have chosen, or the one that was working for them for thousands of years in all these other cultures, which was that the gods lived in the skies underneath the actual firmament, and
Yeah.
that you paid homage to those gods. But I really believe Christ changed the whole paradigm. I think
Yeah.
when he came, he truly, because then the story became he was your high priest who ascended through the heavens to the most high above, which means now he's above every principality, even the false gods in the air above. I really think he changed the game. And so they had to get the wide populace to believe in a completely different reality in order to take away the relevance of the Messiah to them. And so, and this has just been amplified with the heliocentric evolutionary model. I think it started a long, long time ago. But anyway, I'm not going to do a whole show on that. Just
yeah, no, that was perfect. Yeah, my only
a lot there that there's someone asked in the comment section earlier. They're asking about why all these lies, why all this effort, this money being wasted, why this theft. They're trying to not just hide God, but the purpose of the Messiah as well, whom is going to come back with the Father and destroy these wicked people and these unclean spirits and this rebellious angel off the face of the earth and restore peace.
And he returns with a literal, tangible, continent-sized kingdom that they want to hide. They don't want you to know that there's physical, structured ceilings above our heads that could then contain a nestled golden city, right?
Yeah.
That will be the inheritance of the saints, the promised land of Israel. They don't want you to know about that because that's part of the crucial part of the gospel of the kingdom, is that there is a kingdom coming back with the king. And so they hide all of that. They just completely change the narrative of what the scriptures repeatedly, consistently describe, because they don't want you to believe in any of that.
It was, I have a channel called Kingdom Context, and we're always trying to point out the context, right? Part of most crucial parts of context to a story is the setting. So they have brainwashed people to believe in a different setting so that they have a completely different frame of context for everything happening, even though their eyes don't say that, but they're getting people to instantly translate the information through the indoctrination so that they ignore the setting and think something differently. And so therefore suddenly the purpose of the Messiah and his wonderful message of love and restoration, redemption, salvation, it means nothing to people anymore. You know what I mean? So it's been a long time orchestrated religious philosophy that has now been perpetrated with real hard dollars and visual effects and rocketry and all these types of practical effects to get people to have a completely different frame of context so they don't understand how God loves them and his Messiah can save them.
That's right. And that the word heaven is literally the name given to a tangible structure over our heads. If they remove that structure from the minds of people, then there's no more heaven, or they have to now redefine heaven as they do with so many words and just ambiguously, arbitrarily give a new definition to as if it didn't mean something.
Yep.
And I think also the whole concept of this corrupt narrative to hide God from people is to not only hide the future of the kingdom coming to earth, but like you said, Sean, that he's not only hiding the love of the Father from us, but the power, the relationship, the one-on-one relationship. Because if we were to realize what that truly means, okay, to have that type of one-on-one relationship with the Father that will cause us to become far more dangerous enemies to the enemy, then they're in big trouble. I mean, at the end of the day, we outnumber them millions to one.
Right.
They know it.
They can't give us any more arsenal or weaponry than they can. Right. Yeah.
No. And they know that if we were to have the type of doubtless faith that Scripture describes, then we're going to end up a bunch of Elijahs and Moses, and that's a problem. Okay. So and I also totally believe of the alien disclosure that's coming. It is inevitable. Personally, I think the flat earth movement put a pause on that because they were getting really close to it. And then all these nutcases started coming out, hey, the earth is flat. It's in the closed cosmology. And so they were like, oh man, where'd this come from? And of course the Father initiated that. All right. So yeah, I totally believe that the progenitors are coming and our space brothers are coming to save us. That is inevitable. The question is when. I think it's going to be soon, based on the whole COVID deception. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have said that. Based on all of that, they're going to have to play up on that, getting people prepared to believe anything. And didn't they just have a Senate hearing on these secret documents that were declassified, and they were talking about UFOs and stuff like that? I just saw it. There was a Senate hearing, and they were questioning people from NASA about it. And they made a big deal out of it, which was pretty amazing. Say, what are they doing? And also the whole Space Force thing. You know, Trump's making a big deal out of that. And if he ends up getting reelected, how's that going to work out? How are people going to, you know, what is Space Force going to do? They're going to train space warriors? I mean, Star Wars type? I mean, how is that going to, you know, how's that going to work? So they're getting everyone prepared for our space brothers. And I think you're exactly right in that regard. So we'll see when it's going to happen, but it is inevitable.
I'm not brothers with anybody from space, I can tell you that.
Absolutely.
Very great.
Someone in my house, I'll baptize them with my Walther.
There you go.
Yep, exactly.
Hey, WesBlaze, do you mind if I share a quick scripture?
You're welcome to. I was actually thinking of asking you a minute ago. I just know
So, guys, I just want to encourage everyone. You know, a lot of people in the live chat tonight, we're looking at this and going, it's depressing, it's sad, how much money is being forcibly stolen from folks, redirected toward mass propaganda and deception. I just want to encourage you guys, in the same chapter where it describes the Father's and the Son's house coming down through the enclosure above us, it also says in verse 7 and 8, the one who overcomes will inherit all things. And now this word all things here is actually, I've tried to show a whole breakdown on this, where this particular word, the Greek that they translated as all, is often and mostly translated as the word this, right? So it's the context of all things is the previous 6 verses describing the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, right? Which is the paradise of God, which is the inheritance of the saints. So if you want to, the one who overcomes is the one who does the commandments of God, which is the behavior of Jesus Christ until death. You're faithful until the end. That's how you overcome. Yeshua explains this in Revelation chapter 2. And then you inherit the New Jerusalem that comes down out of heaven. And God tells you he will be your God. You will be his son or daughter, for those females listening. Right? So, but I don't think this is any coincidence that this is included in these horrible things mentioned, right? Abominable murderers, immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, liars. Also, the first 2 things are cowardly and unbelieving.
Yeah.
So I just want to encourage people out there. The cowardly comes in with the peer pressure when you've got the whole world screaming at you. Look at the fisheye lens. Look at the CGI composite image they think's a real photo. Look at the news broadcast that showed the SpaceX launch. Look at the, you know what I'm saying? Look at my textbook from 4th grade. You know what I'm saying? So like you got the whole world that's been lied to, trying to make you believe that lie. When you clearly see the scriptures say something different, and you clearly can see too far with your own natural eyes and realize that it's a lie, there is an internal moment of courage that it takes to actually say, you know what, I choose to believe the plainly written words of my Heavenly Father. And this is why those who do not do that, who reject his narrative, they reject the faith in him, the walk with him, the story he's given them, a promise of this inheritance to come, you fall into the category of the cowardly and the unbelieving, right? So essentially, I want to encourage you guys, do not be cowardly. Take courage, right? Be strong and courageous, as Joshua is encouraging us in Joshua 1:8. Okay, this is our call as believers, right? If you're a believer watching this, and you know this is your first time to stumble across biblical cosmological show, just you know, welcome. Watch all of our episodes. Go back and watch everything. But ultimately, just remember that your Heavenly Father asks you to believe His words, which are good for you. So I'm going to choose to not believe cartoon, CGI, Looney Tune images. I want to choose to believe my Heavenly Father's beautiful description of the creation He made, and how He intentionally designed everything for life for me so that it's good for me. And then in the future, He's going to come live here with us. That's the end of the story, guys. So just be strong and courageous. That's what I would
Hallelujah.
encourage everyone listening.
I know that's right. Excellent closing thoughts. Brothers, y'all have been amazing tonight. This was an excellent show, I thought. Michael, you're a perfect addition to tonight's theme and topic.
Yeah, we appreciate
really
it.
appreciate your insight. Yeah,
Great being
absolutely.
here. It was great being here.
Good. I know we ran a little long, so thank you so much for your time. We appreciate
That's
you.
quite all right.
Good deal. Yes, sir. And you guys, if y'all have enjoyed what we've done tonight, share this. I hope to make a few clips. But if you have anybody that would have the attention span to hang out with us for a couple hours, we would love for you to share this with your friends, your family, share it to your social medias, hit that like button, and maybe leave a comment so that we can get a boost in the algorithms to get in front of more people. And if also you've been blessed by what we do, you want to bless this back, as many have asked for options and opportunities to do so, you can find links in the description where you can get shirts like this. You can get on our Patreon. You can help us with things like our Firmament project and just help us to get better at what we're doing. And we just love and appreciate you guys. We're going to end off on Cartoon Ball, a song by ODD TV. Perfect ending, I think. And I hope you guys enjoy that. Any other thoughts?
Good. Appreciate everybody joining us tonight. Be sure to hit the thumbs up.
Please do.
Absolutely.
We bless you guys. We ask that you bless the Father. Shalom to you from under all seven of the domes. And we love you guys. Thank you much. Check out A Cartoon Ball by ODD TV.
It is Photoshop, but it has to be. It is Photoshop, but it has to be. It is Photoshop, but it has to be.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
A lie is a lie, and it don't matter how many dumb sheeple believe it. And the truth is the truth, hiding right out in plain sight, and still people don't see it. Man, niggas shot me hated, and I won't stop till the elite are being defeated. They keep us deceived about everything that we think, and they keep it a secret. What we're taught is not conducive with reality. Big bang, evolution, and there's gravity. I tell the truth, and then these motherfuckers laugh at me, telling me the earth is Photoshop because it has to be. Most people accept the deception happily, but what they're doing to us all is a tragedy. God created the heavens and the earth in a verse, but we're living in a famous on the galaxy. They say we're monkeys on a ball flying through outer space, but there's no proof. It seems to have vanished without a trace. NASA and other agencies falling down from grace. You can take that issue pseudoscience and get out my face. I'm the antisocial type. You're a government prototype. That's why you make it a point to tell me that I'm crazy every time you're angry, because you know I'm right. I'm standing outside the house of cards about to watch it fall. No more living on a cartoon ball. Horizon means horizontal. Indoctrination is awful because you're taught the globe model. Ever since y'all could crawl. We follow rapists and murderers, liars, thieves, and sun worshippers, saying we can't see curvature cause we're all too small. And though it's never been proven, they say we're ripping and shooting. The earth is spinning and moving. Oh no, not at all. It's a criminal enterprise where deception intensifies. NASA got us all living life on a cartoon ball.
It is Photoshop, but it has to be.
What you're seeing here is a mirage.
They say that we went to the moon 6 times, but pure BS is the way that smelled. Now they're telling us that we can't even leave the planet because of the Van Allen radiation belt. Yeah, okay, sure. NASA, what you lying for? You lying now? You lied before. I can't take this anymore. The only thing they took to space was your imagination. Fake aliens are coming, now they have you waiting. We need to do something about it, no procrastination. Trying to cause the masses to awaken, that's the path I've taken. But you can see if you check all the percentages. So many people having cognitive dissonance. But that's what happens at the loss of your innocence. Then you get involved with all of this wickedness. They try to do all the humans this way. So are they just idiots? Who is to say? Conditioned by the television, it makes your decisions, opinions, and you just obey. Stuck in the material domain of Satan, where everything in each and every day is pagan. Mandela effect, cause the game is changing. People waking up and now the cage is shaking. The earth is flat, and that is a universal fact. If it isn't that, then tell me where the curve is at. They tell us that we can't see it because we're all too small. And now we're spinning on a cartoon ball. Horizon means horizontal. Indoctrination is awful because you're taught the globe model. Ever since y'all could crawl. We follow rapists and murderers, liars, thieves, and sun worshippers, saying we can't see curvature cause we're all too small. And though it's never been proven, they say we're ripping and shooting. The earth is spinning and moving. Oh no, not at all. It's a criminal enterprise where deception intensifies. Now got us all living life on a cartoon ball.
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Like
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.